Chapter 513. Such a bad precedent could not be allowed to be set. After figuring out the key points, the strategists remained silent and tacitly agreed to Jiang Pingji's punishment for the soldier who committed the crime. Jiang Pingji said seriously, "He will be punished according to the military law. The whole army will watch the punishment. He will be beaten to death on the spot." Jiang Nongqing bowed and said solemnly, "My lord is open-minded. I will obey your orders." The audience in the streaming room who was watching the whole process exploded. They really did not expect the matter to be settled just like that. Yanjingyao, what the f***ck did I hear wrongly? The male soldier's crime has been established? Shuechao Shangtian Tiantai. Someone who studies law, what kind of crime is this in our country? Bao Bao Longation. Do you need me to explain to you the crime of rape in our country? The crime of rape refers to the act of using violence, coercion, or other means against the will of a woman to have sex with a woman, or to have sex with a girl under the age of 14 intentionally. This is the accurate definition of rape in our country's criminal law. Do you understand? Bao Bao Yiliankin. I understand. In other words, is it not a crime of rape for a woman to have sex with a man or a man to have sex with a man? Bao Bao Shashan Li. In theory it is, but it is still a crime. It is just not a crime of rape. Mama, as a man with a handsome face, I suddenly feel that our country is very dangerous. Can I apply to migrate to Mars? Bao Bao Wang Jimo. Streamer, I feel that you can really go to heaven. When the female soldiers in your female battalion grow stronger, maybe you can consider setting up a men's protection association. After all, your female soldiers are very scary. If there is domestic violence, what will happen to the weak men and women? Bao Bao Lu Zhou. By the way, am I really watching the streaming room in ancient times? The streamer's subordinates are very receptive. Jiang Pingji laughed involuntarily. It was not that they were receptive, it was obviously to prevent any loopholes in the language. Nowadays men were prevalent in the world. The soldiers were ordered not to lay hands on civilian women. In order to vent their lust, they might lay hands on civilian men. Now there were signs. If they did not restrain themselves, it would be difficult to recruit soldiers in the future. Who would dare to come? Wei Ci and the others were only preventing people from taking advantage of loopholes and destroying the atmosphere. It was not to protect men's rights. They considered things with their own thinking, which was very different from the viewers in the streaming room. At that moment, Jiang Nongqing straightened her body and asked Jiang Pingji after some deliberation. Does the Lord still remember a recruit named Dian Yan? Dian Yan. Everyone present was no stranger to this name. After all, Dian Yan was either staying in the military camp or temporarily staying at Wei Ci's house. Jiang Pingji said, "Of course I remember. I even told Han Mei that if Dian Yan completes his recruit training, he can be transferred to my side." After Wei Ci heard this, he secretly glanced at his lord and sighed to himself that the fate between his lord and Dian Yan was indeed destined. "What's the matter with the recruit?" she asked. Jiang Nongqing told him what she saw. She said, "The soldier who committed a serious crime was caught by this person. When I saw him, I saw dozens of human heads hanging on his shoulders and waist. He was very brave. I think this person is a promising talent." Jiang Pingji's fingers tapped on the table. She originally wanted to wait for Dian Yan's training to end before transferring him to her side and nurturing him. This person was born to be a general. If he was properly nurtured, he would definitely become a talent. Now that he had made a name for himself on the battlefield, it was indeed time to promote him. Thinking of this, Jiang Pingji said, "I'll remember this." Conquering Qingan district required people everywhere. Dian Yan came forward himself. If she did not get a strong man to work for him, it would be a disgrace to her nickname of Jiang Bapi. Although there was a general idea of the army farming strategy, it was not easy to carry it out. Jiang Pingji planned to throw this matter to Liyun, Dian Yan and Su Ku. Liyun had experience in reclaiming wasteland and was more familiar with farming. Dian Yan and Su Ku assisted him. While they were discussing, the sound of powerful footsteps came from outside the door. Jiang Pingji knew who they were. Wasn't it Meng Hun and Liyun? "My lord, I have failed in my mission. I did not capture all the leaders of the Tsingyi army who escaped." Meng Hun apologized. Liyun also looked ashamed. They sent people to chase after them, but they were not as familiar with the terrain as the Tsingyi army. Many of the leaders escaped. Wei Ci glanced at Jiang Pingji. Her expression was very calm. He could not tell whether she was happy or angry. He asked Meng Hun, "Officer Meng, do you know which direction those thieves ran to?" Meng Hun thought for a while and said, "It should be the southwest." The southwest. Wei Ci frowned. Su Ku and Qiguan Rang's expressions changed slightly. "It seems that we won't be able to rest for a while." The southwest was Maolin district, which was also the territory of the Tsingyi army. Now that they had taken over Qingan district and Xiangyang district, it was equivalent to the two districts separating Maolin district in the southwest and Jiaoping district in the northeast. It made it difficult for the Tsingyi army in Fengyi County to look around. They were unable to gather their troops in one place. It was very easy to break through. There were a total of 4 districts in Fengyi County. With Qingan district as the center, Maolin district was in the southwest and Jiaoping district was in the northeast. Xiangyang district, which was owned by Jiang Pingji, bordered these 2 districts. It was located in the southeast of Qingan district. From the map, it directly cut off the Tsingyi army in Fengyi County. Regardless of strategy or deployment, the Tsingyi army had the motive to attack Qingan district or Xiangyang district. If they attacked Qingan district, it was equivalent to returning to the original state. However, Qingan district had been ravaged by the Tsingyi army for a whole winter. There was not much to be gained. Instead of attacking the dilapidated Qingan district, it was better to gather their troops and attack Xiangyang district. Xiangyang district was the largest district among the 4 districts in Fengyi County. Now that Jiang Pingji had governed it in an orderly manner, the people were rich and the products were abundant. How could the Tsingyi army not be envious? Taking advantage of the opportunity when the main force was still in Qingan district, it was very likely that they would launch a sneak attack on the weaker Xiangyang district. Su Ku asked, "My lord, are we sending troops back to assist now?" Jiang Pingji suddenly sneered and said, "Why should we send troops back to assist Xiangyang district? We left quite a number of troops there. The siege equipment used for defense is also very sufficient. With Huayu and Luoyue guarding it, what do you think the possibility of losing the city is?" Qiguan Rang tapped his feather fan leisurely and said, "My lord, are you thinking of giving them a taste of their own medicine?" Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes. Some malicious glint flashed in her eyes. "If Jiaoping district and Maolin district really send troops to attack Xiangyang district, we'll go all the way. We'll directly split up our troops and destroy their lair." Everyone was speechless. "That's amazing, my lord." Wei Ci chuckled helplessly. It seemed that he really could not restrict her from going to the battlefield in the future. Seeing that she had nowhere to vent her anger, the Tsingyi army became her punching bag. Her idea was quite good, but it was more conservative. She could only launch a sneak attack on either Jiaoping district or Maolin district. In order not to be obstructed by the strategists, she stubbornly chose to split up her troops to attack the city. The troops would be split into 2. She would lead one group to launch a sneak attack while the others would go to the other group to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 5:14. As it turned out, Wei Ci knew Jiang Pingji's temper quite well. It was as he had predicted. Send scouts to observe the movements of the Tsingyi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district. Report to me immediately if there are signs of sending troops. Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes. She originally wanted to gradually encroach on the 4 districts of Fengyi County. Step by step, steadily and surely. However, the Tsingyi army courted death and gave her such an opportunity. As long as they dared to attack Xiangyang district, she dared to make them lose their nest. Yes. Meng Hun accepted the order. "I will obey." Most of the scouts were in the vanguard battalion. This task naturally fell to him. Su Ku said, "My lord, we don't have enough troops now. If we split our troops to attack Maolin district and Jiaoping district, I'm afraid we won't be able to do it." After he finished speaking, he secretly glanced at Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci, hoping that they would come forward to persuade their lord. However, Qiguan Rang also liked to take risks. Jiang Pingji's unconventional way of sending troops was more to his liking. As for Wei Ci, he knew that it was not easy to persuade his lord. If he dared to dissuade her this time, she would stir up more trouble next time. If the Tsingyi army wanted to attack Xiangyang district, based on the previous battle situation, they would definitely mobilize a lot of manpower. When Jiang Pingji first came to Xiangyang district, the Tsingyi army had 10,000 men stationed there. Didn't they still get wiped out by her? Therefore, if they went to Xiangyang district, they would just be sending themselves to die. They were not a threat at all. If they wanted to see the hope of breaking through Xiangyang district, they would have to mobilize most of their troops. The Xingyi army's rear would definitely be weak. It was not impossible to occupy Jiaoping district and Maolin district at the same time, but it required courage and strong judgment. Suke saw that they refused to speak and immediately understood their intentions. He could only sigh faintly. He could not do anything alone. It was impossible to change his lord's decision. Jiang Pingji sat on the seat of honor and said, "This matter is temporarily settled. If the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district sends troops, we will send troops to destroy their nest. If they know their place, we will allow them to be free and unfettered for a while." Whether to mobilize troops again depended on the actions of the Xingyi army. Currently, Jiang Pingji was still facing the reconstruction of Chang'an district. Because of the experience of Xiangyang district, it was not difficult to rebuild Chang'an district. However, there were still many problems in front of her. The biggest problem was the people of Chang'an district. Because of the Xingyi army's wanton disturbance, the young people who could escape had already thought of a way to escape. Now most of the people who remained in the city were old, weak, sick and disabled. Each of them was emaciated and sallow from hunger. Every household's rice jar had no stored food. Even if they had stored food, they did not dare to light a fire to cook. They were afraid that the smoke from the chimney would cause the Xingyi army to plunder. They could only soak the uncooked rice in clear water and soften it slightly before eating it raw. Hearing the news from Su Ku and the others, Jiang Pingji's slightly cheerful mood became heavy. "How many people are there?" Jiang Pingji asked. "It is estimated that there will be no more than 3,000 people," Su Ku replied. What was more serious was that the 2,000 people were physically weak due to the long-term lack of salt intake. Even if Jiang Pingji provided them with food, not many of them could be used as effective labor force. In this way, the situation in Chang'an district was much worse than that in Xiangyang district. Now that they haven't figured out the movements of the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district, they can't easily mobilize their troops, in case they can't return in time to help. Jiang Pingji said, "I'll go and take a look myself." In another place, 31 troops who broke the law were punished. Fortunately, the circumstances were not very serious. They were just taught a harsh lesson. According to the military camp's rules, the only remaining soldier had to be beaten to death in front of at least one battalion of troops to serve as a warning to others. The person who carried out the punishment was Jiang Nongqin. The soldier was tied up and sent to the military training ground that was temporarily cleared. Jiang Nongqin read out the soldier's crime with a cold expression. All the troops were in an uproar. They had only heard that raping a woman was a crime, but they had never heard that raping a man would also be punished according to military law. However, the military law clearly stated that one could not rape a commoner. The victim was a commoner, so naturally the soldier had broken the military law. Of course, the soldiers didn't say anything about the verdict, but they were still doubtful and opposed it in their hearts. The man was originally a member of the Xingyi army's brothel. Was it considered a violation of military law to touch him? It couldn't be, right? However, they didn't dare to voice out their doubts. Instead, they silently remembered it in their hearts in case they accidentally stepped on a mine in the future. According to military law, he'll be beaten to death. Jiang Nongqin read out coldly. Execute. There were a total of 4 people executing. 2 female soldiers held the soldier's left and right shoulders to prevent him from moving and escaping. The other 2 female soldiers held rods in their hands and beat him to death. Naturally, the soldier refused to accept his fate. He used all kinds of methods and strength in an attempt to break free. The veins on his face bulged and his face turned red. He looked extremely ferocious, and his eyeballs even looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. The heavy rods carried a huge force and smashed on his body. It was so painful that his internal organs were about to shift positions. However, his mouth was blocked. Even if he had a stomach full of resentment, he couldn't shout out. Very soon, a metallic smell gushed out of his mouth. That day the wind was not noisy. The military training ground was silent. The soldiers of the entire battalion were ghastly pale. They were so frightened that they didn't even dare to take a deep breath. They watched helplessly as the soldier struggled violently until he was on the verge of death. Finally he stopped breathing. The area from his back to his buttocks was already rotten, revealing his broken bones. The 4 female soldiers who were executing the execution still looked sullen. They weren't shocked by the scene in front of them at all. Seeing that the soldier had breathed his last, one of them released the hand that was restraining his shoulder. She raised her hand to check his breath and pulse. The female soldier said to Jiang Nongqin, who was watching the execution, "The execution is over. The criminal is dead." Jiang Nongqin waved her hand. "Keep this person's corpse. It's the last mercy." She was punishing the chicken to warn the monkeys and to warn the impetuous soldiers. This was the consequence of violating the military order. Since then, the atmosphere in the military camp was solemn. They were always talking about the military rules, for fear that they would follow in the footsteps of others. Of course, there was another benefit besides that. When the soldiers of the male battalion saw the female soldiers of the female battalion, who dared to flirt with them, when they saw them on the road, their legs turned to jelly. They wished they could walk around them. The food that Jiang Pingji brought was very sufficient. Su Ku and a few others were busy sorting out the paperwork of the district headquarters of Chungan District. Meng Hun and a few others led 2 battalions of soldiers to slightly repair the damaged city walls and gates. Jiang Nongqin led the remaining people to set up porridge stalls everywhere. After about 3 or 4 days, a few uninvited guests came to Maolin District and Jiaoping District. Our General Xianxia died tragically. You have to avenge him. After experiencing a life-and-death escape for 3 or 4 days, how could the leaders of the Xingyi army, who had lived like princes for more than half a year, bear it? Each of them was battered and exhausted. Their clothes were ragged. When they recalled the past few days, they felt that their mouths were full of bitterness. Chapter 5:15. Jiaoping District. Don't worry. Speak slowly. You're a man. Why are you crying? You're so girly. The leader of the Xingyi army in Jiaoping District called himself General Ping Tian. He was one of the leaders of the Xingyi army. When he received a message from a soldier saying that there were companions from Chungan District outside the district and they kept repeating the news of General Xianxia's death, he was horrified. He quickly asked his men to welcome the members of the Xingyi army. At first glance, they were really General Xianxia's subordinates. General Ping Tian thought about it and hurriedly asked these people about the details of General Xianxia's death. Who would have thought that as soon as he opened his mouth, these people were already crying their eyes out. Their faces were smeared with snot and tears. In addition, they hadn't washed themselves for many days, so their faces were stained with something. They looked very dirty and pathetic, and anyone who saw them would feel disgusted. General Xianxian was killed by a group of people. They even snatched Chungan District and swaggered in. They drove our brothers out. General Xianxian died unjustly. The crying leader of the Xingyi army was the subordinate who had previously flattered General Xianxian. In order to escape, he could not bear to leave the good days of the Xingyi army, so he could only seek refuge with his accomplice. Has Chungan District been breached? Hearing the news, General Ping Tian of Jiaoping District was frightened. He hurriedly asked for details. Brother, don't cry. Tell me first which bastard killed Brother Xianxian. How many people did he bring? Chungan District was very close to Jiaoping District. It would only take a little more than a day to reach there on foot. Since the enemy had conquered Chungan District, it was hard to guarantee that they would not target Jiaoping District. If they turned around and waved their troops, he had to at least know the details of the enemy and be mentally prepared. Hearing General Ping Tian's concern, the leaders of the Xingyi army who had abandoned General Xianxian's corpse and fled, cried even more sadly. They held the only emotional card firmly, hoping to get a good position here with the little favor left by General Xianxian. They miserably described Jiang Pingji and her men as particularly abominable. They tried their best to beautify General Xianxian's noble image and described how the general sacrificed himself for others to delay the invading army, so that his brothers could have precious time to escape. Hearing these compliments, General Ping Tian secretly curled his lips in disdain. According to his understanding of General Xianxian, how could he not know his temperament? If he could abandon his subordinates in exchange for his own life, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. How could he sacrifice himself for others? However, it was not appropriate for him to say this out loud. He also revealed a rather moved and sad expression, matching the other party's acting skills. After a long time, General Ping Tian finally found out who had conquered Chang'an district. Xiangyang district. This is not easy. That's a tough nut to crack. No one has been able to crack it for half a year. The Tsingyi army only knows how to plunder. How would they know how to build? No matter how good the cards were, when they fell into their hands, they could only play out the worst situation. Chang'an district had been destroyed to such an extent that they were so poor that they couldn't even find a grain of rice. General Ping Tian knew how to restrain himself. He did not drive the people of Jiaoping district to a dead end in one go. However, he still took advantage of them from time to time and plundered them again and again. The people were miserable and there were often people who wanted to escape. General Ping Tian did not know about other things, but he knew that there were no commoners in the district city. There was only the Tsingyi army left. In that case, how could he still be considered a general? Therefore, he cracked down on any attempt to escape and captured all the commoners who had escaped. However, life forced the commoners. Even if they risked being killed by the Tsingyi army, there were still commoners who tried to escape. In the face of this phenomenon, General Ping Tian was of course so angry that he gritted his teeth. At the same time, he was even more envious of the nearby Xiangyang district. However, the district city was as tough as a tortoise's shell. It was not easy to go anywhere. Hearing that Xiangyang district had taken the initiative to attack Chang'an district, General Ping Tian was extremely flustered. Do you know how many people they brought to Chang'an district? General Ping Tian was secretly anxious. He was afraid that Jiang Pingji's next target would be him. He had not enjoyed the prestige of being a general enough. About 6 or 7,000, maybe a lot more than that. The leader of the Tsingyi army answered cautiously. Of course, he did not know the exact number. He only guessed based on his feelings. How could there be a small number of people if they could conquer Chang'an district so easily? Little did he know that it was precisely his nonsense that made General Ping Tian develop greedy thoughts that he should not have. 6 or 7,000. General Ping Tian asked in surprise. Are you sure there are so many? There should be. There are too many thieves, so I can't distinguish them at the moment. The leader of the Tsingyi army secretly pinched the corner of his clothes. He was extremely nervous. 6 or 7,000. The total number of troops in Xiangyang district is less than 10,000. General Ping Tian's heart trembled. A bold idea shrouded his heart. He was so excited that he could not even hold his things steadily. If the people in Xiangyang district really sent 6 or 7,000 troops to attack Chang'an district, it meant that there were at most 3 or 4,000 troops guarding Xiangyang district. It would be a fool's dream if they wanted to defend the huge Xiangyang district with such a small number of troops. Perhaps he could take advantage of it. General Ping Tian was very clear about the situation in Chang'an district. It was a super big mess. It could definitely entangle Jiang Pingji and the others so that they would have no time to take care of the situation in Xiangyang district. In this way, the rear of Xiangyang district would be empty. However, thinking of the losses that the Tsingyi army suffered in Xiangyang district last year, General Ping Tian did not dare to let his guard down. If he wanted to conquer the city as soon as possible, he had to have sufficient troops. Taking advantage of the fact that the rear of Xiangyang district was empty and the main force was delayed by Chang'an district, he could take a gamble. Even if those people reacted, Xiangyang district would have already changed hands. When the main force rushed to the city, it would be of no help. Thinking of this, General Ping Tian's heart was burning. Originally, he only wanted to take 60% of the troops to raid Xiangyang district, but now he could not wait to take all the troops away and conquer Xiangyang district as soon as possible. He could not help but think of the shocked and resentful expression of Jiang Pingji's main force. Thinking of this, he comforted General Tsangtian's old subordinates with a gentle voice. He was in a good mood. Although General Ping Tian looked down on General Tsangtian's fat body and stupid brain, he also wanted to annex the old subordinates left behind by General Tsangtian. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. If he could absorb the Tsingyi army that was under General Tsangtian's control, his power could expand again. General Ping Tian asked, "Apart from you, are there any other brothers who survived?" The leader of the Tsingyi army answered miserably, "Only a few hundred brothers were lucky enough to escape. The rest were all killed. Some of them fled to Jiaoping district while the rest fled to Maolin district." General Ping Tian was shocked. He was afraid that the Tsingyi army in Maolin district would also think that Xiangyang district was empty and run to take advantage of the situation. A sense of crisis arose. He patted the shoulder of General Zhongtian's old subordinate and said indignantly, "General Zhongtian and I were comrades. He was killed by the traitors. How can I not avenge him as a brother? Don't worry. I'll summon the troops and destroy the traitor's lair." Chapter 5:16. Not long after, the scouts who were paying close attention to the activities of the two counties sent news that the two counties were in the midst of organizing their troops. Hearing that, Jiang Pingji smiled slyly and proudly. If she did not make the Tsing-Yi army lose everything, she would write her name backwards. "Assemble the troops and count the soldiers," she said. "Summon the gentlemen and the lieutenants." Just as Wei Xiai thought, Jiang Pingji planned to split her troops into two groups. One group would launch a sneak attack on Jiaoping district while the other group would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. After conquering the two districts, they would assemble their troops and rush back to Xiangyang district. They would coordinate from the inside and the outside to outflank the Tsing-Yi army's rear. They dared to lay their hands on her property. If she did not teach the Tsing-Yi army a lesson, they would really think that she was a pushover. Jiang Pingji already had a draft in her mind on how to divide the troops. Jiang Pingji planned to leave 1,500 to guard Qingan district. She would lead 1,500 elites to launch a surprise attack on Jiaoping district, and the remaining troops would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. What they were fighting for now was the time difference. The sooner the better, the higher the chance of victory. "Zixiao, you're not feeling well. It's not suitable for you to rush over in a short period of time. You and Officer Meng will lead these 1,500 soldiers to guard Qingan district." The damaged city gate had already been partially repaired, and together with the city defense equipment, it should be able to resist for a period of time. "Wenjing and I will attack Jiaoping district. Hanmei, Nongqin and Xiaoyu will lead the remaining soldiers to attack Maolin district. We must conquer it as soon as possible." Wei Xiai secretly cried and laughed. She had indeed chosen Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang would not stop her from having fun at all, but he had no choice but to accept the order along with the others. Jiang Pingji said decisively, "We'll set off after nightfall." It was hard to guarantee that no enemy scouts would discover their intentions during the 100-day march, but it was much safer at night. At the same time, far away in Xiangyang district, Feng Jin was still wandering in the sea of documents. Feng Jin's recent daily life could be summed up in 11 words. Very busy, extremely busy, super busy. Everyone's work pressure was piled on him, and he said that he should spend more time with his wife. It was all a lie. How busy were they exactly? Ever since the army set off for war, he had not stepped foot into his house. Currently, there were only 4,000 soldiers left in Xiangyang district. Although it was not considered a shortage, if there was a heavy pressure on the border, these 4,000 people would not be enough. Fortunately, his lord still had some conscience. What conscience? She did not drag Zhang Ping, the treasurer of Xiangyang district, along with her. The carpentry workshop that Zhang Ping was in charge of could produce all kinds of siege and defense weapons. These things could give Xiangyang district more confidence. Under Feng Jin's instructions, Zhang Ping got the woodworking workshop to manufacture all kinds of defensive equipment urgently. He wished he could arm the entire Xiangyang district to the teeth. Of course, from Zhang Ping's point of view, with their current level of equipment, even their teeth were made of cast iron. Feng Jin was so busy that he could not see his wife, but his wife could come and see him. She was even carrying Chongqing, who could speak clearly, in her arms. "Daddy, Daddy, hug." When Chongqing saw her father, whom she had not seen for a few days, she excitedly asked for a hug. Feng Jin rubbed his sore eyes to make sure that his ears and eyes were not hallucinating. He really heard his daughter's call and also saw his wife and daughter standing at the entrance of the government office, hesitating and not daring to approach. Seeing that Wei Jingxian was worried, Feng Jin said to her, "Come in, there are no important documents here." He raised his hand to catch his daughter, who had become a ton heavier. Before he could sigh, Chongqing stepped on his thigh and kissed him. "Don't kiss me, don't kiss me. Doesn't this girl find it dirty?" Feng Jin had been staying up late for several days. He slept less than 2 hours every day and was so busy that he did not have the time to wash up. He looked a little embarrassed. His daughter kissed him immediately, afraid that she would get dirty. "Daddy?" Chongqing was despised. She tilted her head in confusion. His daughter was still young. Feng Jin did not know how to explain. He could only look at Wei Jingxian for help. His wife was still the best. She understood his predicament and reached out to carry his daughter back. She said gently, "Daddy is tired. Don't disturb him." Changxing lay in Wei Jingxian's arms. Her big watery eyes were like those of a fawn, which melted people's hearts. Cool. Changxing hugged her mother with both arms. Wei Jingxian glanced at the table and was shocked by the pile of documents on it. Why are there so many? Xiangyang district was only a district. Why were there so many documents that needed to be handled? In her impression, the district magistrates were very idle. They were either walking their birds and dogs every day or spending their time in the mountains and rivers. They were so free and unfettered. Her husband only assisted Lanting. When Lanting went to war, her husband temporarily took over the official duties. Why was he so busy? Feng Jin rubbed his eyebrows and said, "After the spring plowing, we still have to collect farm tools and cattle. These things have to be accounted for." Xiangyang district is considered a rare peaceful refuge in the north. Every day refugees from all over want to enter the city. These people have to be settled. Many wealthy families have migrated here to seek refuge. They want to buy the good houses under the Lord's name. They have to deal with these. Currently, Xiangyang district was still under construction. It was becoming more and more prosperous. Seeing how clean and beautiful the newly built rental houses in the district headquarters were, many locals of Xiangyang district felt uncomfortable. They also wanted to rebuild their houses. However, if they wanted to rebuild, they had to pay for all the materials and labor costs themselves. It was not cheap. That kind of house could not be built with money. They still had to go through the procedures of the district headquarters. They had to approve the kiln to fire this batch of green bricks. They had to confirm the quantity of green bricks before they could start building the houses. In the end, they needed Feng Jin's signature and approval. Otherwise, they couldn't build the houses. Usually, a few people would share the workload. Now that he was the only one left to look after the house, it was naturally very tiring. Apart from these messy matters, there were also the local government affairs of Xiangyang district and various conflicts. They were trivial and troublesome. It was either conflicts about family affairs or disputes about the uneven distribution of land. Feng Jin really wanted to throw these matters to the women's department in the government office. However, the women's department was already crazy busy. As a man, he really couldn't bring himself to make things difficult for a group of young ladies. Wei Jingxian saw that her husband's eyes were bloodshot and his eye bags were dark. Her heart ached a little. She asked, "Are these documents very important?" Feng Jin was startled. His brain, which hadn't slept for a long time, reacted slowly. After a while, he understood the meaning of her words. "It's not important. It's just very trivial," Feng Jin said. Wei Jingxian thought about it. She reached out and took a portion of it. Then she sorted the various documents according to their importance. Changxing stayed in her arms and squirmed restlessly. She raised her claws and grabbed her sleeve. She minded her own business and played with it. After eating the milk paste in the afternoon, Changxing lay on Wei Jingxian's thighs and slept with her limbs spread out. Her fat calves could hook onto the table. She was busy from noon to dusk. Only then did the mountain of bamboo slips slowly decrease. "Thank you, madam." Feng Jin rubbed the space between his eyebrows and smiled at Wei Jingxian. "Let's go home," Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Chapter 517. "Mr. Feng, something bad has happened," Luo Yu said. Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to carry the sleeping Changxing, Luo Yu's voice made him stop. "What happened?" "The Tsingyi army in Maolin district and Jiaoping district are going to attack us. It's less than half a day's journey." "What?" Feng Jin widened his eyes in shock. Why did the Tsingyi army suddenly attack Xiangyang district? The Tsingyi army in the two districts are still well behaved. Why did they suddenly attack Xiangyang district? Xiangyang district had sufficient troops and horses. The Tsingyi army had tried a few times but failed. Why would they take the initiative to find trouble now? Could it be? Feng Jin's brain started to work again. He quickly figured out the crux of the matter. It was most likely that Qingan district had been conquered. The other two districts thought that Xiangyang district was weak and wanted to take advantage of it. He secretly gritted his teeth. He couldn't continue following a lord who specialized in tricking her subordinates. Wei Jingxian's face paled. Husband, were they preparing for another war? It's okay. Take Chongqing home first. I can't go back for a few days. When Lanting comes back, I'll make her pay. You can't cheat me like this. He had said that he would stay behind to accompany his wife and child, but in the blink of an eye he had caused such a huge mess. Feng Jin got up and strode out of the government office. Wei Jingxian let out a long sigh. She lowered her head to look at her daughter who had just woken up with a start. She felt terrible, but there was nothing she could do. In this chaotic world, it was impossible not to be disturbed by wars. He lowered his head and kissed his daughter's brow. He whispered, Chongqing, let's go home and wait for your father to return. There was still half a day's journey before the arrival of the Xingyi army. Xiangyang district still had plenty of time to prepare. Feng Jin inquired about the number of guards and defensive equipment at each city gate, and his heart calmed down a little. Fortunately, the city defense equipment was ready. If it was a night battle and a sneak attack, the Xingyi army would not be able to return. Feng Jin usually gave people the impression that he was a dignified gentleman. It was rare to see him angry. If people thought that he was a kind person because of this, they would be making a big mistake. Anyone who dared to lay their hands on Xiangyang district, he would make them pay a painful price. He and Luo Yu inspected the city walls, and only after ensuring that there were no problems did they feel relieved to leave the city walls. Feng Jin said in a low voice, the two troops of the Xingyi army are attacking in different directions. According to the scouts' reports, there's a certain difference in the time of arrival. Tell the soldiers on both sides of the city gates to keep a close watch and not let their guard down. We have to hold on for at least 5 days. This is going to be a tough battle. Luo Yu nodded as he listened. He had no objections to Feng Jin's arrangement. After a while, Feng Jin suddenly said, "Oh, right after nightfall, no matter who it is, the city gate must not be opened." Luo Yu's heart tightened. These words had a profound meaning. Could it be, what you mean is that there are spies from the Xingyi army in the city? Luo Yu asked. Feng Jin frowned and said, that's hard to say. After all, when we first entered Xiangyang, we captured many members of the Xingyi army. It's hard to guarantee that the former members of the Xingyi army are not related to those enemies. It's always better to be cautious. Luo Yu looked indifferent on the surface, but he remembered these words in his heart. The current Xiangyang district was a paradise in troubled times that they had poured their blood, sweat and tears into for half a year. No one was allowed to covet it. Even if he felt that the members of the Xingyi army who had surrendered were completely loyal and would not rebel, nothing was absolute. It was better to be cautious. I understand. I'll definitely pass this message to the guards at each city gate. In order to ensure that the soldiers had sufficient energy, they changed shifts every 2 hours after nightfall to ensure that everyone was full of energy. In the dark night, torches were lit on the city walls of Xiangyang district, like the only light in the world. Jiaoping district was the closest to Xiangyang district. It would only take them a day and a half if they traveled at full speed. It was already late at night when they arrived. One of the minions said, General, it seems that the security in Xiangyang district is quite strict. General Ping Tian rode a tall and strong horse. This time he brought more than 5,000 members of the Xingyi army with him. Each of them was an elite. Those who stayed in Jiaoping district were old and weak. They were not suitable for long-distance raids. If he brought them along, they would definitely slow down the pace of the army. If it's not strict, why do you think this fat piece of meat hasn't been taken away? General Pingtian's heart skipped a beat. He said coldly, I've sent people to investigate the situation in Xiangyang district in the past. The guards are 2 to 3 times weaker than they are now. Now that they're so solemn, it's obvious that they're not confident. The more weak they were, the more they had to pretend to be powerful. General Ping Tian was even more confident. The minions flattered him. General is unparalleled in wisdom. No matter how hard Xiangyang district tries to hide, it can't hide from your sharp eyes. General Ping Tian snorted. However, the minions had a sweet tongue, so he flattered him very much. Let's wait a little longer. We'll launch a surprise attack with a rocket at midnight. General Ping Tian was different from the other leaders of the Xingyi army. Not only did he like to plunder money and beauties, but he also liked to organize various weapons. For example, A rocket was an arrow that was pierced with a coarse cloth dyed with oil and then shot out with a bow. Once it pierced into the flesh, the wound would easily fester and become infected. He wanted to launch a surprise attack and catch the other party off guard, but he did not know that Xiangyang district was already prepared. Was it a big deal to have a rocket? The night was dark. Feng Jin seized the opportunity to sleep for a few hours. At midnight, the minions woke him up as ordered. How's the situation at the north and west gates? Are there any signs of the enemy? Feng Jin took the wet cloth from the minions and wiped his face casually. The cold water stains and the night breeze dispelled his remaining sleepiness. He could not help but shiver and his mind was completely awake. The minions replied, "Sir, there are no signs of the enemy at the north and west gates." Feng Jin took a deep breath and said, "Don't let your guard down." Everyone in the Xingyi army had different degrees of night blindness. It was difficult for them to see things at night, but it did not mean that they could not launch a night attack. The torches at the city gates were burning fiercely. They could be seen from afar. It was the best guiding light for the Xingyi army. Many soldiers were also informed that there might be a surprise attack by the enemy tonight. All of them were on high alert. It was late at night. This was the time when the people slept the most. Even the Xingyi army, who was lying in ambush, could not help but rub their eyes. At this moment, a member of the Xingyi army with excellent eyesight saw that the soldiers on the city walls were already yawning sleepily. It seemed that they could not open their eyes. He immediately said to General Pingtian in surprise, "General, it's almost time." The grass outside the city was lush. It was an excellent cover for the Xingyi army. They slowly approached the city walls. They were less than 300 meters away, but the soldiers on the city walls still did not find any traces of them. General Pingtian was overjoyed. He ordered, "Launch the rocket." Because the shooting range was not enough, the archers needed to move forward further. Chapter 5:18. The archers of the Xingyi army crouched down and passed through the dense grass. They were getting closer and closer. General Pingtian's heart was in his throat. The distance between them was gradually shortened from more than 300 meters. 250 meters. 200 meters. 150 meters. After all, ordinary bows and arrows were not improved crossbows. Not everyone could draw a heavy bow with a longer shooting range. It could be said that this archer troop of more than 100 people was General Pingtian's flesh and blood. He would be heartbroken if even one of them was gone. As they got closer and closer, General Pingtian felt that the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn. He commanded the Xingyi army to move forward slowly. The night became their best camouflage. The Xiangyang district seemed to be within their reach. Finally, the archers entered the shooting range. One by one, they took out their bows and arrows from the quiver at their waists. The arrowheads had been wrapped in a layer of coarse cloth that was stained with oil. They only needed to use a flint or a match to ignite it and it would be instantly ignited. It would pierce into one's flesh and cause great damage. The sound of flint rubbing against each other was heard. Some sparks splashed on it and a cluster of flames appeared. General Pingtian stared fixedly at the soldiers on the city wall. He was still yawning sleepily. At that moment, the archers had already drawn their bows and aimed at them. He shouted in a low voice, "Shoot!" However, a second before the archers released their bowstrings, the soldiers who were yawning lazily suddenly squatted down and hid under the battlements. Black shields rose from under the battlements, and the arrows pierced directly into the shields. General Pingtian widened his eyes in astonishment. "What's going on? What's going on? They've already discovered it. They're just cooperating with you." The shields blocked the first wave of arrows. The soldiers hiding under the battlements hurriedly pushed the ballistae to the edge of the city wall. The arrows were already loaded. The ballistae could be used for both sieging and defending a city. According to Jiang Pingji and Zhang Ping's research, they further improved the known ballistae so that 6 heavy bows could be placed on them. They twisted the reel at the back, loaded the arrows, and used the combined force of the heavy bows to shoot special long arrows. The shooting range was 600 steps and it was extremely lethal. The shaft of the crossbow was made of wood, the head of the spear was made of iron, and the tail of the arrow was made of iron. According to Jiang Pingji's previous experiments, ordinary ladders, giant shields, and wooden curtains could be easily penetrated. It could be said to be as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The members of the Xingyi army were also within shooting range. Wasn't that courting death? The arrows left the bowstring and buzzed incessantly as if carrying the roar of the crowd. The arrows rained down on the Xingyi army like the tide. When the shield on the city wall was raised to block the fire arrow, General Ping Tian was stunned. The vanguard troops of the Xingyi army had already carried ladders to the city walls, but they were greeted by tyrannical arrows. The arrows easily penetrated 2 or 3 people's bodies and blood splattered everywhere. Their bodies tumbled due to the inertia of charging forward, and then they stopped breathing. The enemy was prepared. When General Ping Tian realized this, he was extremely shocked. He did not know where the news had leaked out. The soldiers on the city walls were obviously very sleepy. It did not seem fake at all, but reality slapped him hard in the face. After the first wave of arrows rained down, the members of the Xingyi army who were shot were either dead or no longer had the strength to fight. A strong smell of blood permeated the air. General Ping Tian gritted his teeth. He bet that Xianxia district's defense was weak. As long as they climbed up the city walls, they would definitely win. They must not be scared off. Thinking of this, he roared, "Attack the city!" The ladders were placed on the city walls so the crossbows could not reach them. The members of the Xingyi army would die faster if they escaped. No matter how fast they escaped, could they run 600 steps in an instant? In contrast, the city walls were closer to them. All of this was within Feng Jin's expectations. He raised his hand and covered his curled lips with his long sleeve. He also covered the bloodthirsty and fierce glint in his eyes. Prepare the rolling logs and stones. The city walls of Xianxia district were not too high. The remaining members of the Xingyi army had already approached the city walls after leaving 700 to 800 corpses behind. The archers stood in the blind spot of the crossbows and shot. On the other side, members of the Xingyi army had already climbed up the ladders. The people who climbed up first were hit by the rolling logs and huge stones. They screamed and fell to the ground with a dull thud. Although the members of the Xingyi army fell miserably like dumplings, there were still people who approached the height of the city walls. Below them they carried the heavy logs and hit the city gates. Each sound seemed to hit the hearts of everyone. Feng Jin continued to command calmly. Among the troops there were experienced veterans. Naturally, there were also new recruits who had yet to see blood. They were so nervous that their hands were trembling. However, under Feng Jin's loud and calm command, their trembling hands and rapidly beating hearts gradually calmed down. Their brains could not think of anything else at all. Their bodies followed Feng Jin's command to move the equipment or load the bows and arrows. The wooden shield was very heavy. It required 3 people to hold it together to be able to stand steadily. It blocked the many rocket attacks of the members of the Xingyi army. Load the rocket, Feng Jin continued to command. The troops picked up the improved crossbows and lit the arrows. It was indeed difficult to move the crossbows, but it did not mean that they could not fight back. They would give them a taste of their own medicine. The rocket carried flames and pierced through the dark night sky. It pierced the members of the Xingyi army who were climbing the ladder and successfully pushed a group of people down. "Sir, the pressure at the city gates is getting stronger and stronger." Lu Yue, who was dressed in armor, ran up from below the city with a ghastly pale face. Feng Jin said, "It's okay. Continue." There was more than one group of members of the Xingyi army attacking Xianxia district. There was another group. As long as the city defense weapons were not exhausted, it was impossible for these people to climb the city walls. There was no doubt about the penetrating power of the improved crossbows. Coupled with the lethality of the rocket, almost every member of the Xingyi army who fell from the ladder did not have a chance to wake up. It was not only because the rocket penetrated their bodies, there was another important reason. Their companions stepped on their bodies to climb up the ladder. Even if their corpses were not completely dead, they were trampled into meat paste by these feet. Feng Jin continued to command the troops guarding the city. Everything was in order. Compared to the casualties at the bottom, the troops guarding the city were at most slightly injured. The logs below were still trying hard to hit the city gates. General Ping Tian's face was already ghastly pale and black. The city gates could not be climbed up and the city walls could not be broken. Could it be that the military strength of Xianxia district was not as few as he thought? His firm heart had begun to waver. However, he had no way out now. If he retreated at that moment, he would definitely be annexed by the nearby Xingyi army. In serious cases he might even lose his life. There was no possibility of him turning back now. He could only bite the bullet and go forward. At that moment he hoped that the Xingyi army in Maolin district would attack Xiangyang district. In that case the chances of winning would be greatly increased. The sound of hitting the city gates continued. Not only were there soldiers resisting inside the city gates, but there were also thick and heavy green bricks. Yes, Feng Jin had moved tens of thousands of green bricks produced from the brick kiln to the city gates to block them. Even if the Xingyi army used all their strength, would they be able to break it open in a short time? Chapter 519. Sheng Wanwan had been living in the district headquarters for a while. Jiang Pingji originally wanted to arrange a 2-level house for her, but she felt that she should not receive a reward without doing anything. She would only receive a reward after she had accumulated a certain amount of experience in the district headquarters. Otherwise she would be dissatisfied and be criticized by others. Jiang Pingji knew Sheng Wanwan's stubbornness, so she did not insist. It was good for her to live in the district headquarters. At least no one dared to ignore Sheng Wanwan. The girls in the government office dared not belittle or neglect her. With her background she got the hang of the work in the government office quickly. The girls gradually admired her and acknowledged her as their superior. Because the army took many talents with them, the pressure in the government office suddenly increased. Sheng Wanwan was busy until the 4th watch before she finished her work. She washed her face with the cold well water to wash away her sleepiness. She was barely awake. The Xingyi army attacked wantonly. The soldiers were defending outside the city. Sheng Wanwan was very worried, but she could not help much. She could only do the work at hand and try her best to reduce the administrative work. She planned to go back to her room to rest for a while. As she walked, she gently beat the sore spot on her neck with her fist. Halfway there, her sharp eyes saw a black shadow quickly drifting across the corridor, and her heart suddenly leaped into her throat. Who's there? Sheng Wanwan secretly pulled out the short knife from her waist and looked in that direction vigilantly. After a while, the black shadow stopped and said to her, "Oh, it's Lady Shangguan." This voice. Isn't it Sister Lanting's maid Takshu? Her tense nerves relaxed. Sheng Wanwan sighed and said, "Oh, it's Sister Takshu. You scared me." She went forward and said, "Sister, are you getting up at night? Why didn't you light the lamp? It would be bad if you tripped because you couldn't see clearly." Sheng Wanwan opened the paper and found that Takshu was still carrying a lamp. She helped Takshu light the lamp. She knew it. How could she not light the lamp when she woke up in the middle of the night? It was probably blown out by the strong night wind. "Thank you, Lady Shangguan," Takshu said gently. "Did you just come back from the government office?" "Yes, there are too many trivial things in the government office. But thinking of the chaos outside, these things have become sweet burdens." Sheng Wanwan felt that she had found a new self. Whether it was her job in the government office or practicing martial arts to strengthen her body, she was full of motivation and vitality. Takshu was still gentle. She held the lantern and said, "It's dark outside. Lady Shangguan, go back to your room and rest. You still have work to do tomorrow." Sheng Wanwan's room was very close. She declined Takshu's attempt to give her the lantern, waved her hand and returned to her room while yawning. Takshu stood rooted to the ground for a long time. It was not until Sheng Wanwan opened the door and lit the candle in the room that she revealed a strange smile. She turned her back to Sheng Wanwan's room, raised her hand to the side of the lantern, and gently blew on the candle inside, extinguishing the flame inside. If Sheng Wanwan had looked more carefully and focused, she would probably have noticed Takshu's abnormality. The clothes she wore on the outside were obviously much larger and did not seem to fit her body properly. The lapels of her clothes were grayish-brown in color. Takshu quietly left the district headquarters and took off her clothes, revealing her grayish-brown clothes. This was the uniform of the female battalion. She folded up her outer clothes and placed them in a corner of the alley. She stood rooted to the ground for a while. She looked at the west and north gates in the distance, and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes. After a long time, her figure disappeared into the darkness and shadows. She did not go to the west and north gates but to the south gate. At the moment, the battle on Feng Jin's side had already entered a state of bloodthirst. Occasionally, 1 or 2 members of the Xingyi army would climb up the city walls. The soldiers would also work together to smack them down with their heavy shields. There were already several piles of corpses at the foot of the city walls. The Xingyi army stepped on their corpses and climbed up, getting closer and closer to the city walls. Below them, the frequency of hitting the city gates became faster and faster. Every time they hit, a layer of wall dust would fall. Dozens of cracks had already appeared on the sturdy city gates. It looked like it was about to be smashed. General Ping Tian secretly gritted his teeth. Is this gate made of copper and iron? It's already so rotten, but it still hasn't been knocked open? Finally, when the Xingyi army was about to exhaust their strength, the city gates that could not bear the burden were finally scrapped. However, what blocked their way was a thick brick wall made of solid green bricks. There was no one behind the city gates to stop them. A group of soldiers were using green bricks to block the entrance. F***CKU. General Ping Tian could not help but curse when he saw the situation. On the city walls, Feng Jin ordered someone to bring the wolf's fang slap over. He planned to teach the Xingyi army a lesson. Luo Yue had already rushed to the south gate to guard. It was estimated that another group of Xingyi army would arrive soon. Bring the wolf's fang slap. Feng Jin's voice was already hoarse. Even though he tried his best to shout loudly, he seemed especially weak in the midst of the battle cries. What was the wolf's fang slap? It was a rectangular object that was slightly flat. The surface was covered with sharp, thick and long iron nails that were like wolf's teeth. There were buckles at the four corners and they were hooked to the city walls with sliding ropes and pulleys. If the enemy intended to climb the city walls to attack, they could use the wolf's fang slap to hit them. With one slap there would be dozens of bloody holes on the body. There were still plenty of weapons to defend the city, but the Xingyi army was already showing signs of defeat. In particular, the Xingyi army was filled with joy. They spent a lot of effort to break through the city gates, only to discover that the entrance had been blocked by countless neatly arranged green bricks. Breaking through them was no different than breaking through a city wall. That kind of feeling was simply terrible. Initially, they thought that they would be able to attack and take them down very quickly. They never expected the other party to be so well prepared and use all kinds of methods. General Ping Tian was stunned. He never knew that defending a city could come up with so many tricks. Now he was in a dilemma. After fighting for nearly 4 hours, the Xingyi army had lost many men. Occasionally, some soldiers on the city walls were injured due to carelessness. They only had ladders and bows and arrows to attack the city, but the other party had ballistae, improved ballistae wooden shields and fire arrows. If they were so capable, why were they holed up in the small Xiangyang district? Why couldn't they just go straight to heaven? General Ping Tian was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He felt as if he had had countless sows. He originally thought that he was there to CK the world, but he didn't expect that he would end up being the one to CK the world instead. After a while, the soldiers told Feng Jin that they had used up all the rocks and rolling logs, and there were not enough arrows in the quiver. Feng Jin gritted his teeth as he watched the Xingyi army gradually climb the city wall. Although they were killed, their numbers had obviously increased. Move the green bricks up. If there were not enough rocks, he would make up for the green bricks. He did not believe that he could not defeat the Xingyi army. Yes. Elsewhere at the south gate, Luo Yue hurried to the south gate and found that there was no special situation there. It was also the soldiers' turn to change shifts. He asked the guards carefully, but he could not calm down. Chapter 520. All was silent. There was a chill in the corner outside Xiangyang district that made one's hair stand on end. Takshu, who was dressed in a female battalion uniform, waited in the dark for a while. There was a rustling sound in the bushes in the distance. After a while, a short figure wrapped in a thick black cloth emerged from the bushes. This strange person was abnormally short. When he stood up, he was only a head taller than the lush bushes outside the city. If he bent down and hid in the bushes, he would not be seen at all. The person groped his way to Takshu's position and made a strange chuckle. The person made a hoarse and piercing voice and said in a peculiar tone, "You're more precious than the princess in the palace. It's so hard to see you." Takshu was initially leaning against the corner of the city wall. When she saw the person approaching, she put down her arms and threw a parcel at him. "Here's what you want. Take it and get lost." Takshu threw the parcel into the man's arms and was about to leave. Wait, little lady. The short man chuckled and asked in a strange voice. I heard that Xiangyang district has countless riches. Even the priceless colored glazewares come from here. You've been serving that young master personally for so many years. Don't tell me you don't even know the slightest bit of information? You send back useless things every time. Are you trying to get rid of a beggar? Taksha glanced sideways and looked down at the man coldly. She said, I've always ignored beggars. If they dare to pester me, they'll definitely die a horrible death. Tell me, if you're a beggar, how would I get rid of you? I'm just a lowly servant by her side. I can't enter places like the study, let alone get anything useful. I've tried my best. The man saw that Taksha was a little angry and quickly comforted her. Don't be angry, little lady. I'm only saying this because I have no other choice. You know that you haven't sent back much useful information all these years. The higher-ups are already angry. If you continue to slack, both you and I will have to bear the consequences. I don't think you want your beautiful sister to enter that kind of place and be defiled, right? Taksha sneered and said coldly, You're really useless. You keep threatening and using the same trick. The man chuckled and shamelessly admitted, It doesn't matter if the technique is old or not as long as it works. I heard that Lu Shi treats you very well. In the future he can take you in as a concubine. If you can give birth to a son or a daughter, considering the relationship between master and servant, your life will be good. I only have a handle on your sister now. If I don't hold on to her tightly with your intelligence, why would you risk your life for me? Taksha revealed a disgusted expression and lowered her head. She seemed to be thinking about what the other party had said and was deliberating about something. The man continued, Forget it. I heard that the glazed artifact is extremely precious. It belonged to the Marquis of Guanyi Su Gong. Even mortals can't get their hands on it. Now it's all been bought by the barbarians of the northern borderline with a huge sum of money. I'm not begging you to get me the colored glaze, but you have to find a way to get me the way to make the green brick. Don't tell me that you can't even do this after serving Lu Shi for so many years. Takshu pursed her lips, and there was a look of struggle in her eyes. It was as if she was fighting with herself. After a while she said, I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to get it. You know that Lu Shi is extremely vigilant. Apart from herself, she doesn't trust anyone. Even I can't know all her secrets. The way to make the green brick is probably hidden in a secret place by her. I can only say that I'll try my best. How about this, come back in half a year? Half a year? The man's voice suddenly rose. Taksha sneered. Half a year is already very stressful. Lu Shi is no longer the young man who can be easily fooled. Now he's as shrewd as an old fox. Even the slightest abnormality will be suspected by her. If I'm exposed, the last pawn that you've placed by her side will be useless. Who will pass on her news to you in the future? Xuanmei has already defected. Don't expect her to be useful. The man hesitated and struggled in his heart. He still felt that half a year was too long. Taksha continued, She brings me with her wherever she goes now, and the county residence is usually strictly guarded. If she hadn't gone to war this time, how could I have found a chance to contact you? Half a year is stressful enough. If you think it's too long, get yourself another pawn. The man was almost choked by Taksha's words. If it was so easy to place pawns, why were there only Takshu and Xuanmei after so many years? Xuanmei had hugged Lu Shi's thigh a long time ago and remarried. Fortunately, Xuanmei did not know any confidential information. Otherwise, how could she be alive? Taksha was different. She was cruel and merciless, but she had helped them do many confidential things. It was not easy to raise a talent, and it was even more difficult to raise a talent who could avoid Lu Shi's eyes and ears. Although Lu Shi had been depressed for a while because of the death of his beloved wife, he was still very strict with his supervision and cleanliness of the backyard. He had quietly gotten rid of all the spies he had planted. One by one they had died a miserable death. His methods of killing were extremely cruel. He had clearly vented his anger over his wife's death on these spies. Even when Lu Shi went to Hu County, the Lu residence was still guarded by Gu Jin and by Dai. It was still watertight. He had spent a lot of effort to protect these two pawns. He was not willing to give up on Takshu now. The man said, All right, I'll give you half a year. You must get the method to make the blue brick. Takshu nodded. Her cold expression became a little more gentle. In the end she asked hesitantly, "How is my sister doing now?" The man said unhappily, "She's not much worse than the Empress's life. She's doing well." "'S good." Takshu heaved a sigh of relief. Before she left, the man asked again, "Are there really no other daughters in the Lu residence?" Takshu's expression did not change. "No. Isn't the only daughter of a mistress married into the royal family?" The man muttered to himself and left with the small bag that Takshu had given him. Before he left, he did not forget to remind her. "Takshu, we've known each other for more than 10 years. You and I both know that don't be as silly as Xuanmei. We have to be loyal to our master so that we can have a good life in the future. Remember, we are the most obedient dogs of our master. We can only bark when she asks us to bark. Otherwise we'll be barking wildly. That's mad dogs. Don't be won over by Lu Shi." After the man finished speaking, he went back into the bushes. The night wind blew and the darkness of the night covered Takshu's strange and cold expression. "Who said that I'm loyal to your master or Lu Shi?" Chapter 521. Seriously, letting a bunch of weak women guard the city gate. Is there something wrong with the higher-ups' brains? At the south gate, the soldier guarding the gate yawned and squeezed out 2 drops of tears from the corner of his eyes. He complained lazily. His companion, who was patrolling with him, lowered his voice and said, "Don't talk nonsense. We can't afford to offend those women." "What's wrong?" The soldier raised his right eyelid lazily and said disdainfully, "I used to be a bandit. Although I've turned over a new leaf, it's not like I haven't tasted women before. They only know how to scream when they encounter something and they're as weak as a kitten." Before the soldier turned over a new leaf, he was a bandit who robbed houses. It wasn't that he was bad by nature, but that life was too harsh. Like the youths in the village, he had no choice but to become a bandit. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to survive. There were many bandits like him who were recruited to turn over a new leaf. Now that he had become a good person and stopped committing crimes, it didn't mean that everything in the past could be written off, nor could it be treated as if nothing had happened. His companion lowered his head and thought for a while. "The other women are like that, but these, it's best not to say that." Seeing his companion's secretive look, the soldier was surprised and asked curiously, "What's so special about these women?" His companion thought for a while and said, "In short, they're different from those who only know how to cry and drag us down. The spears in their hands aren't just for show. They're all used to kill people and they know martial arts too. Unfortunately, I heard that the higher-ups have decreed that these female soldiers can only retire from the army at the age of 24, get married and have children. Otherwise, I really want my mother to propose marriage." The soldier almost burst out laughing. "You blockhead, you're really strange. You don't want a fragrant and soft woman but a female worm? You're really young and don't understand the taste of women. When you're older and more knowledgeable, you'll know what a real woman is." His companion blushed at the soldier's teasing. How could he not understand the meaning behind the soldier's words? However, he still shook his head honestly and lowered his voice with a hint of embarrassment. "I think a female worm is pretty good. Let her be fierce," his companion said a little uneasily. "But isn't the world different now?" He heard from his brothers that the man-eating beasts of the north borderline coveted Dongqing. Say, if the wife he married met those beasts and only knew how to cry and scream, wouldn't she be pinned to the ground and gang-raped in the end? "At least I have a life, but what if I get eaten?" The soldier was taken aback as if he hadn't thought of this. While they were talking, there were 2 female soldiers patrolling opposite them. "What's the matter?" the other side asked. The soldier replied, "Everything is normal." The 2 sides continued patrolling. Watching the 2 female soldiers leave, the soldier muttered, "They're quite decent." At this time, the battle between North and West Gate had reached its climax. After the rubble was used up, pieces of green bricks faced the Xingyi army and smashed them down one by one. By the time the extra bricks were used up, there was already a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood beneath the city walls. Both parties were already in a killing frenzy. More and more members of the Xingyi army climbed up the city walls, while more members of the Xingyi army were sleeping under the city walls. The soldiers on the city walls defended the territory of the city walls with their flesh and blood. They fought for every inch of land and the sounds of killing resounded through the clouds. Tonight was destined to be a bloody night. No one could sleep in peace. Fortunately, the previous bloody battle had depleted most of the main forces of the Tsingyi army. In the end, only 600 or 700 members of the Tsingyi army could climb up the city walls. Under Feng Jin's orderly command, they used the remaining defensive equipment to stubbornly defend. They advanced or retreated, making use of the geographical advantage of the city walls to slowly whittle down the strength of the Tsingyi army. In terms of defensive equipment, Xiangyang district did not lack it at all. However, they were fighting on two fronts, so half of the equipment was allocated to the other side. Feng Jin was tense all along. Even though he was standing at the back and commanding, there were still members of the Tsingyi army who rushed to him. Fresh blood dyed his wide sleeves and cloak red. Occasionally, severed limbs and broken bones or the heads of strangers rolled to his feet. There was almost no place on the entire city walls that was clean. Dawn had just broken. There were a few sparse stars in the dark sky. The orange morning sun shone on the world and broke through the night sky. The killing cries at the west and north gate gradually subsided. General Ping Tian did not even step down the stairs of the city walls. He was stabbed to death by a long spear. The stairs were filled with corpses. Most of them were the enemies. Occasionally there were their comrades. At this moment the battle at the south gate had just begun. The Tsingyi army in Maolin district was also aggressive. However, they did not launch a sneak attack in the middle of the night. Instead, they chose to launch a strong attack when the night was about to break. The number of Tsingyi army troops they brought was 2,000 more than the number at the west gate. As the soldiers at the city gates were already prepared, the first wave of sneak attacks did not cause any casualties with the wooden shields. As the leader of the Imperial Guards, Luo Yue had excellent abilities. It was just a battle to defend the city. It was not enough to make him flustered. Different from Feng Jin's meticulous arrangements, Luo Yue's commands were more rigid. If Feng Jin was said to be a seemingly soft but dense net that did not leave a single gap, Luo Yue was a thick and strong shield. The former was more meticulous while the latter was more steady. Jiang Pingji took away most of the elites, but the female battalion only took away 500 to 600 people. The number of female soldiers who stayed behind was almost a quarter of the garrison in Xiangyang district. Luo Yue heard them say that the strength of the female battalion was not bad, but he did not witness it with his own eyes. However, the reality was far better than what Luo Yue had imagined. He initially thought that they had not seen blood before. Faced with such a large battle formation, they would panic or scream in fear. In the end, they did not. He secretly lamented that Jiang Nongqin and his lord were good at training people. In his impression, the female soldiers who only knew how to cry actually had courage that did not lose to the men. They used the improved crossbows well, and their shooting accuracy was not the least bit inferior. Indeed, who would care about gender at the juncture of life and death? The female and male soldiers cooperated to load the crossbows and shoot at the attacking enemy. The soldiers who raised their shields blocked wave after wave of arrows that were shot from below the city. However, there were always stray arrows that passed through the wooden shields and injured people. They pierced into the flesh. Although it was not fatal, the injury was not light. At such a time, naturally, no one could bring the injured down for treatment. They could only use brute force to pull the arrowheads out. Then they used a torn piece of cloth to bandage the wound tightly to prevent it from bleeding too much. Compared to the west and north gates, the south gate had more resources to defend the city. The crossbows stopped the enemy at a distance of 500 steps away. The Tsingyi army tried to approach the south gate with their shields, but the penetrating power of the crossbows was far more terrifying than they had imagined. However, although the crossbows were powerful, there were only more than 30 on the city walls. It was impossible to stop all the Tsingyi army. Finally, they abandoned hundreds of corpses and finally approached the blind spot of the crossbows. Chapter 522. When General Ping Tian left Jiaoping district with his troops and horses, intending to launch a sneak attack on Xiangyang district, Jiang Pingji was leading 1,500 elites to deviate from their marching route and quietly sneak toward his lair. She even brought a lot of siege equipment. Looking at Jiang Pingji, who was eager to fight and excited, Qiguan Rang could only smile bitterly and say, "My lord, I don't want to go back and be scolded by Xiaoyu and Zixiao. If you're injured, it'll be hard to explain when you go back." In other words, if Jiang Pingji had the ability to ensure that she would be unscathed, she could do whatever she wanted. Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh when she heard that. She said, "What you mean by that is interesting. You make it seem like I'm going to do something bad." Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows and asked Jiang Pingji with his eyes, "Isn't that considered doing something bad? If she brought Su Ku or Wei Xi, she would definitely be stopped. However, since she brought Qiguan Rang, he would not stop her." Fine. I'm doing something bad, all right?" Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. She lowered her voice and said to Qiguan Rang, "According to what you said, I'm doing something bad by rushing in front. Then aren't you Qiguan Rang, a servant who watches the door for me?" As she spoke, a black shadow appeared in her line of sight. Jiaoping district was lying on the horizon, like a ferocious beast in deep sleep. It made people feel nervous for no reason. These troops were basically elite veterans with rich experience in battles. They were very familiar with how to approach their target without batting an eyelid. After about an hour, they finally approached Jiaoping district. There were very few guards on the city wall. Each of them yawned continuously. Qiguan Rang was a scholar. He could not care less about how dirty the ground was. He could only learn to hide in the dark. After looking for a long time, he realized that there were very few people on the city wall. It was obvious that the security was not strict. Jiang Pingji lay in the grass. Her eyesight and night vision were far better than ordinary people's. She asked Qiguan Rang, "Do you think there's a trap up there?" Qiguan Rang secretly rolled his eyes. If he said there was a trap, would his lord obediently guard the rear? Definitely not. The Xingyi army led at least 5,000 people out of the city. According to the news, there are at most 7,000 Xingyi army soldiers in Jiaoping district. In other words, there are only about 1,000 to 2,000 Xingyi army soldiers in the city. There are so few of them, it's not even enough for one bite. Qiguan Rang said carefully. Jiang Pingji's facial expression did not change. The leader of the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district is an extremely magnanimous person. He doesn't have any abilities, yet he dares to bring so many people with him. Isn't he afraid that his nest will be destroyed? Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue and said sarcastically, "Wenjing, don't you think so?" Qiguan Rang indicated that he could not answer this question. In terms of magnanimity, who could be more magnanimous than the lord beside him? If Su Ku and the others hadn't stopped her, she might have left a few soldiers guarding the gate and left with all her belongings. Qiguan Rang heaved a long sigh as he thought of Feng Jin, who had brought 4,000 soldiers to guard Xiangyang district. He sympathized with his brother very much. When his lord had just entered Xiangyang district, Qiguan Rang had guarded Xiangyang district. At that time there weren't so many city defense weapons. They relied entirely on tactics and ruthless schemes, as well as the soldiers' bravery and fearlessness. Only then did they manage to repel the Xingyi army. Of course, if the Xingyi army had enough rations at that time, Xiangyang district would probably be destroyed. Therefore, as someone who had been through it, Qiguan Rang could completely understand the feeling of being bullied and wanting to curse at the same time. It felt extremely good. There were hundreds of thousands of viewers who had the same opinion as Qiguan Rang. Xinbong, trash streamer, how can a crow laugh at a pig? Reflect on yourself when you criticize others for being magnanimous. Jintian Bougie, streamer, you're a typical example of a magistrate being allowed to do whatever he wants, but the people aren't allowed to light up the lamps. She's too overbearing. Nenjiujing, dear friends, you have to know that the outcome of a protagonist courting death and a cannon fodder courting death is different. Obviously, Jiang Pingji was the protagonist. Not only did she have the halo of a protagonist, but she also had powerful abilities. If she courted death, others would die. If the cannon fodder courted death, they would die. General Ping Tian was obviously such a cannon fodder. He was thinking about the delicacies in other people's pot and completely forgot that he was cooking porridge in his own pot. You're right, my lord. Qiguan Rang abandoned his moral integrity and chose to go along with Devil King Zhang's words. I have a novel idea. I don't know if I can give it a try. Jiang Pingji hid in the bushes and held a meeting with her strategist. The troops waited silently for further instructions. Qiguan Rang's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He was afraid that his lord would cause trouble again. If anything happened to her, he was really afraid that Su Ku and Wei Xi would kill him when he returned. Su Ku was still all right as he was somewhat honest, but Wei Xi was weak and black-hearted. Qiguan Rang really did not want to offend him. What idea? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and said to him, Come closer and listen carefully. After listening, Qiguanrang felt that he had opened the door to a new world. It turned out that attacking a city could be done this way. How dirty was his lord's heart? Even the mother river of Dongqing could not wash it clean, okay? On the other side, Li Yun, Su Ku, and the others led the remaining 2,000 troops to Maolin district at top speed. Along the way, no one dared to talk or joke around. Most of the troops were trained to march a short distance with heavy loads. Apart from Su Ku, who was a scholar and could not bear it, the rest of them looked all right. What was surprising was that the hundreds of female troops who were thought to be left behind followed closely, but their faces were pale. In comparison, Su Ku, who was panting while riding a horse, was the most useless in the entire army. Because they deliberately took a detour to avoid the Tsingyi army in Maolin district, the entire 2,000 troops rested and reorganized in a call in the mountains. They were prepared to attack Maolin district after the Tsingyi army left. Su Ku moved his legs uncomfortably, his face was ghastly pale. Li Yun, the honest lad, saw that Su Ku's movements were a little strange, so he opened his mouth to ask. Your inner thighs are torn? It hurts a little when you walk, but it will be fine after applying some medicine. I have something for you, sir. Do you want it? Su Ku's face darkened. He noticed that the surrounding people were looking at him suspiciously. He rejected them awkwardly. No need, I'm fine. Li Yun adjusted his breathing while showing concern for Su Ku. Sir, you don't look well. Su Ku's mouth twitched. Silence was golden. Faced with such an honest lad, how could a normal person look well? I'm just worried about the Lord's side. Will there be any changes? Su Ku casually changed the topic. Because of her willfulness, Jiang Pingji only brought 1,500 elites and a few siege weapons. It was impossible for Su Ku not to worry. But thinking that the Lord had also brought troops to occupy Xiangyang district, he felt that he was worrying too much. Reality proved that his Lord's thinking was not something that ordinary people could understand. Chapter 523. Qiguanrang had always thought that his heart was dirty enough, but he did not expect his lord to be even dirtier. Not only did she sneak attack the enemy's lair, she even wanted to conquer Jiaoping district without expending a single soldier. With such capabilities, why didn't she ascend to heaven? Jiang Pingji glared at Qiguanrang. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm just giving it a try. Anyway, there's still plenty of time. He silently shut up, then passed an order to the soldiers behind him. He asked them to find a soldier who was fluent in the northern dialect. Not long after, an ordinary-looking soldier who could not be found in a sea of people was brought over. Qiguanrang glanced at him. Are you usually quick-witted? Although the soldier looked very ordinary, his eyes were exceptionally spirited. One look and one could tell that he was quick-witted. The soldier was a little puzzled, but it was rare for him to speak to someone above him. He must have performed well. The soldier smiled foolishly and said, Clever. I'm very clever. I'm not stupid at all. Qiguanrang asked again, How clever are you? The soldier was puzzled, but he said, Very clever. My mother wants to beat me. No matter how angry she is, she will calm down as long as I speak. Qiguanrang frowned and thought for a while. He waved at him. Come here. I have a task for you. Do it well. If you do it well, you'll be rewarded. When the soldier heard that there was a reward, his eyes lit up. He hurriedly replied, Just tell me, sir. I'll definitely do it well. Qiguanrang said, Come closer and tell me in detail. Jiaoping district was located in a remote area. There were only 1,000 Tsingyi army soldiers in the city. It was extremely stressful to guard the 4 city gates with such a small number of people. The Tsingyi army was not a regular army. Those who stayed were old and weak, disabled, or those who liked to cheat. It was late at night. Many of them hugged their spears and leaned against the pilings of the wall to sleep. It was not difficult for those who were slightly better at martial arts to climb over the wall. Spring plowing had just ended and the weather was erratic. It was slightly warmer on the whole. At night, the night wind was still bone-chilling. The people of Jiaoping district were having a hard time. They were like sheep reared by the Tsingyi army, and they would come and pluck a layer of wool from time to time. Unfortunately, the Tsingyi army did not treat the people well and they did not know how to govern. They just blindly prevented the people from leaving Jiaoping district, and their methods became harsher and harsher. This caused the people's lives to become more and more miserable. Once night fell, the people would try to escape. In the beginning, the Xingyi army used forceful methods to deter and intimidate the people in Jiaoping district. The people were afraid that they would be in trouble, so the number of people who escaped gradually decreased. However, the increasingly difficult life tormented the people, causing them to rather risk being discovered and executed to escape. However, the city gates were tightly shut. How were they going to escape? Little did they know that in this world, money could make the devil push the millstone and even the devil push the millstone. As long as he gritted his teeth and took out his belongings to bribe the Xingyi army that guarded the city gate that day, if he was lucky he could still get out. The Xingyi army was just a motley crew and they were all commoners. Who wouldn't be willing to turn a blind eye and let one or two unimportant commoners go to earn some extra money? Of course, when doing this business he couldn't let the higher-ups know. For the Xingyi army that guarded the city gates, this was a lucrative job. The trivial matters in Jiaoping district had long been reported back to Xiangyang district by the spies. Jiang Pingji had been unhappy with the neighbors around her for a long time. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one emerge victorious in 100 battles. She understood Jiaoping district very well. The soldier she chose was indeed a clever person. He found a secluded place and climbed over the city wall. Then he squatted near the northeast corner gate that Jiang Pingji mentioned for a quarter of an hour. As expected, he saw a few sneaky figures. He hurriedly waved his hands to stop them. They also wanted to smuggle out, but they were discovered by the soldier. How would they dare to make a fuss? Each of them was scared out of their wits. They were worried that if they were caught by the Xingyi army, their whole family would be beaten to death. "Brother, I want to ask you something." The soldier had changed into the linen clothes of the commoners. He spoke with a northern dialect and it was obvious that he was a local nearby. However, he lowered his voice and it sounded a little strange. "Are you also prepared to fork out money to leave the city?" There were a total of 9 people in this group. There were 2 old people, 3 adult men and 2 emaciated women. They were all carrying children who were sleeping soundly in their arms. "What do you want?" The leader, a strong man, glared at the soldier fiercely. He looked like he would take action if the soldier dared to make trouble and steal their money. The soldier said calmly, "Hey, don't be anxious. I don't have any bad intentions. It's just that your family is quite pitiful. Most of your life savings have been given to those Xingyi bastards. I feel pity for you." "Who are you?" The strong man did not relax. He used his body to block the soldier's line of sight. I'm from Xiangyang. Look, I'm wearing real woolen clothes." As he spoke, the soldier rolled up his sleeves slightly and pulled out the cuffs of the layer of woolen undershirt that was used to keep out the cold. He sized up the crowd with a disdainful look. "This outfit costs a few hundred coins. Do you think I care about your little money? To be honest, I escaped from here last winter. At that time I was short of money, so I didn't bring my mother with me. This time, while the Xingyi army is about to collapse, I sneaked in ahead of time and brought my mother to Xiangyang to enjoy a comfortable life." The soldier's words were convincing. He was also a complete actor. He did not even blush when he lied and boasted. Most of the people in Jiaoping district had heard of woolen clothes, but they had never seen them before. However, the strong man's attention was not on the snow-white woolen sleeves, but on something else. "What do you mean the Xingyi army has collapsed?" The soldier was startled and said, "You don't know? The Xingyi bastards took the people to war. We don't know when they'll return. There are thousands of bastards in the district now, but most of them are still sleeping like pigs. I reckon that even if we cut off their heads now, they probably won't wake up. Otherwise, how did little brother crawl in? I think it's easy for you guys to flirt with the Xingyi bastards at the city gate. There's no need to pay. I stopped you to ask where the people in Dogtail Alley went. I couldn't find my mother for a long time." The strong man thought for a while and asked his wife. He said to the soldier, "The houses in that alley have been requisitioned by those bastards. The people living there have been driven to the north of the city. Your mother should be in the north of the city." The soldier nodded happily. "Right, thank you, big brother. I'll bring my mother to Xiangyang to enjoy a comfortable life." However, before he could take a step, he was stopped by the strong man. The man asked, "Little brother, you said those Xingyi bastards were taken to war. Chapter 524. The soldier vividly portrayed a talkative and warm-hearted young man. While he was enthusiastically concerned about the family, he complained about how tough his life was before he went to Xiangyang and how good his life was after he went there. Indeed, if his life was not good, how could he afford to wear woolen clothes that cost hundreds of copper coins? After rambling for a while, the soldier said casually, "By the way, brothers, I'll share my experience with you as someone who has been through it. If you're planning to go to Xiangyang, I suggest you go to Qingan district first. It's nearer." Qingan district? The strong man had completely let down his guard. He couldn't wait to know more about the outside world. He frowned and said suspiciously, "I heard that Qingan district has become a ghost. The Xingyi bastards there are even more inhuman than the ones here. If our family goes there, it's no different from looking for the king of hell to reincarnate." The soldier was also startled for a moment. Then he let out a hey, and slapped his forehead with his hand, smiling awkwardly. "Look at my bad memory. I forgot to tell you that the bastards in Qingan district have been taken care of." The soldier lowered his voice and there was a tinge of excitement in his words. "The person who took care of these bastards is the one in Xiangyang district. He's amazing. He took care of them in half a day." The few men's eyes lit up when they heard that. They squeezed the soldier's hand excitedly. "Really?" The soldier nodded heavily and said, "It's true. How can it be fake? It's not easy to get a household registration in Xiangyang district. Those newly built houses can't be bought no matter how hard they try. Brothers, go to Qingan district and wait. Imagine what Xiangyang district looked like in the past. It was also occupied by the Xingyi bastards. Now it's like a paradise on earth. It's so beautiful." The strong man followed the soldier's lead and asked, "Do you think that Qingan district will be as good as Xiangyang district in the future?" The soldier nodded affirmatively. "Of course. I heard that the magistrate of Xiangyang district is short of manpower. I plan to settle down and find a good job there in the future. Last year I didn't make it in time. Everything was almost built when I went there. I heard that those hardworking families can earn enough money to buy a house. They don't have to worry about food and drink." The soldiers could praise Xiangyang district for hours without stopping, but now was not the time to be chattering and showing off. The soldier was beaming with joy as he spoke, as if Xiangyang district was really a paradise on earth. Of course, for these people who were tortured by war and poverty, it was no longer as simple as a paradise on earth. The soldier said a lot of things and muttered regretfully, "It's a pity that I don't know when the magistrate of Xiangyang district will come here. If he comes here, maybe I don't have to take my mother away. Look at my mouth, I can't stop talking. Brother, please don't laugh at me. It's getting late, I have to take advantage of the dark to pick up my mother." The soldier's careless words struck the hearts of a few strong men. No one would want to leave their homeland unless they really couldn't live anymore, not to mention that the price of leaving was emptying their family's savings. Now that there was a great opportunity in front of them, if they could grasp it, they would prosper in the future. The rumors of Xiangyang district that they had heard in the past surfaced in their minds, and their hearts thumped wildly. The few brothers looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. "Big brother, what do you think? Do you want to do it?" "I want to do it. My parents are old, my wife just gave birth to a baby and the baby is still young. How can they withstand the torment? Why don't we do it and capture all those bastards, then send someone to Qing and to invite those lords over? Otherwise, how are we going to live?" The third person also agreed, but one of the women was carrying a child who was sleeping soundly and looked worried. "But what if those Xingyi bastards come back?" The soldier's heart skipped a beat. He secretly thought that this woman was going to ruin things. He looked as if he had just understood and smiled sheepishly. "Sister-in-law is right, you guys better not take the risk. Run away if you can. We're not saints, it's enough as long as we can control ourselves. I see that the uncles and aunties aren't young anymore. Big brothers, find some helpers and beat up those bastards at the city gate. Run away if you can. This place is deep and it's not easy to run away." The few men looked hesitant and struggled. The soldier's heart stirred and he added fuel to the fire. "Big brothers, you guys have reminded me." The man in the prime of life asked, "Remind what?" The soldier said matter-of-factly, "All for the city. If I persuade the villagers and this matter succeeds, won't it be a great merit?" As soon as he said this, the three men's expressions changed abruptly, and the greed in their hearts gained the upper hand. Yes, if they were to offer Jiaoping district, it would be a great merit. Why didn't they think of it in such a short time? They were almost delayed by their own women and pushed away such a good thing for no reason. Thinking of this, he glared fiercely at the woman who spoke, causing her to shrink her neck in fear. Fearing that this merit would be taken away by the soldier, the three men first said with embarrassment that they had left something at home and asked him to take care of it. Of course, to be on the safe side, the two older brothers left, leaving the youngest brother to delay the soldier. The soldier secretly heaved a long sigh of relief. It was not easy to fool people these days. His master Qiguan said that if there was no movement in the city at dawn, the elites outside would attack Jiaoping district. Now that it was nighttime, if they moved quickly they should be able to catch up. Seeing the family return, the soldier who was hiding in the dark frowned and secretly rejoiced that he was lucky. Looking at the big brother who held him back, the soldier's heart skipped a beat. He pretended to be an enthusiastic and simple-minded fool. Outside the city, Jiang Pingji sleepily yawned. Qiguan Rang looked up at the moonlight and he was somewhat uncertain. Could a single soldier really instigate the people in the city to rebel? If Jiaoping district has sufficient troops, the people who are used to being oppressed and threatened will most likely not have the guts to rebel. However, there are only 1,000 people in the Xingyi army in the city, and it's the time when everyone is sleepy and asleep. It's a dark and windy night, the time to commit murder and arson. While they were talking, conspiracy was brewing in Jiaoping district. The oppressed people formed groups of 3 to 5. They held their own kitchen knives for cooking, chopping firewood, carrying poles for carrying firewood, clubs for washing clothes. They took whatever they could and rushed madly to the territory of the Xingyi army, which they knew was the territory of the Xingyi army. Most of the members of the Xingyi army who were guarding the place were already drowsy, and some directly entered their dreams to look for the Lord of Zhou. Chapter 525. Many members of the Xingyi army were hacked or hammered to death in their sleep. Some were lucky enough not to be beaten to death. They were just tied up with ropes and stuffed in their mouths to prevent them from making any noise and waking up the other members of the Xingyi army. In the beginning, these people were still anxious and uneasy. They only had some courage when they acted with people they were familiar with. However, after 1 or 2 times, they saw that the beasts who once bullied them were no longer angry. The little fear in their hearts dissipated. Just as they saw, the members of the Xingyi army were not made of copper and iron. They would still die if their heads were chopped off. This rebellion plot lasted for a whole hour. The heavy night sky gradually faded and there were a few more traces of green and white. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms and sat in the grass. Her back was straight, her head was slightly lowered and her eyes were closed. Others thought she was closing her eyes to take a nap, but in fact she was sleeping. She was sleeping. Qiguan Rang looked at his lord in amazement. She had maintained this sleeping position for more than 2 hours. What are you surprised about? Jiang Pingji suddenly opened her eyes and said calmly, as a qualified general, you should develop this habit. No matter what environment you are in, you should be able to fall asleep quickly and conserve your energy. Don't make a fuss about nothing. She woke up and slept as she pleased. Jiang Pingji looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. Is there still no movement in Jiaoping district? Qiguan Rang said, I've already sent scouts to gather information. They should be back soon. At that moment, Jiang Pingji glanced at the city wall in the distance. The guards who should have been standing on it had disappeared. She said, it should be about time. Let's put on an act until the end. Let's retreat for a distance before coming back. Qiguan Rang was startled. Jiang Pingji said matter-of-factly, otherwise when people leave the city and see a group of us rubbing our hands together, won't they know that there's something fishy going on? They offered the city and we passively took it over. Jiaoping district was not seized by us, understand? It was seized and others rushed to deliver it. The two sounded different. Qiguan Rang almost choked. Why didn't he know that his lord had such a shameless side to her? Thinking of something, Qiguan Rang said, if that's the case there won't be a chance for the lord to display his skills. Jiaoping district was conquered without bloodshed, and it was because the others had rushed to help. Naturally, Jiang Pingji did not have to charge and break through enemy lines. She said, look at what you're saying. It's as if I'm a bloody warrior. People would die in war. Even if it was an overwhelming victory, it was hard to guarantee that there would be no casualties. It would be best if they could take over Jiaoping district peacefully. Why are you fighting? You're harming the harmony of the world. Jiang Pingji spoke righteously. Not only did Qiguan Rang think she was shameless, but the audience who stayed up late to watch the livestream also ridiculed her. Yuantong Courier. Hehe, the biggest joke of the year. The host is a pacifist. Zhongtong Express Post. I think there's nothing wrong with the host's words. The enemy's life is not life, but the life of one's family is different. Shintong Express. Sigh, the streamer must have forgotten how much she wanted to fight on the battlefield. I could feel the resentment emanating from her even through the screen. Now he turned around and said that he was a pacifist. Didn't he feel ashamed? In fact, Jiang Pingji was indeed a pacifist, but her peace was to stop killing by killing. She killed the enemy. She did not care how many enemies died, but she would avoid unnecessary losses on her side if possible. Before Qiguan Rang could speak, Jiang Pingji said, according to the time and distance after we take over Jiaoping district, if we take shortcuts, we can rush back to Xiangyang district and attack the rear of the Tsingyi army. I'm worried that we can't defend Xiangyang district. After taking over Jiaoping district without bloodshed, the loss of troops on Jiang Pingji's side was almost zero. The biggest advantage of taking over peacefully was that she did not need to spend time to appease the people. She could even temporarily recruit a group of people to help defend Jiaoping district. She could bring 1,000 troops to aid Xiangyang district. This was the fastest way she could think of. Qiguan Rang frowned and asked, how can this be? 4,000 troops are indeed tight, but Huayu and Coach Luoyue are not easy to deal with. The defense in the city is perfect. It's almost impossible for a motley crew like the Tsingyi army to take over Xiangyang district. You said it's almost impossible, not absolutely. Jiang Pingji's face darkened as she said, Wenjing, do you still remember when I left Hejian and followed my father to Shangjing? Why did I entrust the troops to you to take care of them? Qiguan Rang did not understand. He carefully recalled the memory of that time and suddenly thought of something. His expression changed slightly. My lord, you mean Lady Takshu? Qiguan Rang was stunned. That year, Jiang Pingji sneaked into Wei Yuan's residence late at night and entrusted the trifling matters of the troops to Qiguan Rang. Between her words, she hinted that there was a dirty person around her. At that time, Qiguan Rang did not know who she was until she left Xuanmei behind and took Takshu away. According to his understanding of Jiang Pingji, the more dangerous something was, the more she liked to keep an eye on it. Later, when Su Ku married Xuanmei, Qiguan Rang was even more certain of his guess. My lord is really muddle-headed. Since you're sure that there's something wrong with Takshu, why don't you? Qiguan Rang looked anxious. Takshu's identity had yet to be revealed. If she did something in Xiangyang district, it would be hard to guard against it. Jiang Pingji raised her eyes lazily and said, Wenjing, don't worry. Although I'm a little risky, I'm not fooling around. There's something wrong with Takshu and it's a big problem. Do you understand that she has more than one master behind her back? After so many years I've found out about one of them, but I've never had a clue about the other. It's better to keep her by my side than to plot in the dark. But if she takes advantage of this crisis and lets the Tsingyi army enter the city, she won't do that. Jiang Pingji sneered and said with absolute certainty, before achieving a certain goal, she won't do anything to hurt me. Perhaps more than anyone else, she hopes that I can gain a foothold in the north. Qiguan Rang was speechless. His intelligent brain felt inadequate. Suddenly, he said irritably, Isn't Lady Takshu the personal maid that the old master prepared for you? How could she be taken advantage of? Jiang Pingji said meaningfully, Yes, my father prepared her, but she can't handle her long hands. If she told Qiguan Rang that there was something wrong with Xuanmei, he would probably go crazy. What kind of luck does my father have? There's something wrong with the two people he arranged. As they were talking, the tightly shut city gate of Jiaoping district opened. A group of more than 100 people sneaked out of the city before dawn. About half an hour later, the two groups of people met on the way. The people were trembling with fear. Jiang Pingji looked solemn and reported her origins in a low voice. I'm the district magistrate of Xiangyang district, Lu Shi. Who are you and where are you from? Lu Shi? The district magistrate of Xiangyang district? The people were in an uproar and they discussed animatedly. At that moment, a rather old leader slowly stepped out of the ranks and bowed with his hands folded in front. We are the people of Jiaoping District. The people of Jiaoping District? Why are you here? Chapter 526. As the old man knelt, the hundreds of people behind him also knelt on the ground, begging. Each of them was sallow and emaciated, and their skin had an unhealthy color to it. It was as if they would faint if they said 2 more words. The audience in the streaming room could not bear to see this. They could not help but send bullet screens to advise Jiang Pingji to stop putting on a show and quickly accept these people. Yibio, streamer, they look so pitiful. Didn't you say that the common people are like duckweed in troubled times? They're begging you so much, just accept them. Anyway, this is also one of your plans. It's not good to let them kneel. Jiaging Yizhang. Tisk, that's why I said the streamer's heart is really dirty. It's obvious that she covets Jiaoping District. She secretly instigated people to kill the Xingyi army who stayed behind and begged her to accept Jiaoping District. Tiske, she gets all the good things. Is there any justice? Wu to Wuchi. This scene reminds me of a TV series I used to watch. The situation was similar. The refugees were begging the protagonist. At that time he felt that it was a little funny. After all, the extras didn't act well. The refugees didn't look like refugees, nor did they look like they were begging. It was more like they were watching the protagonist's monkey show, which made people feel awkward. Looking at this scene, to be honest, I felt that I needed to calm down. Qitian Shuangbi, you guys are thinking too much. Is the streamer the kind of person who likes to put on airs? The facts proved that Jiang Pingji was not. At least she would not make the people kneel on the ground and kowtow until their heads were broken. All of you stand up and speak. If you have any grievances, feel free to speak up. Fai Lushi can help everyone settle it. I will definitely not refuse. Jiang Pingji dismounted from the horse and helped the few people who were kneeling in front of her up. It's deep in the night and the ground is moist. Get up and talk. The leading old man had a high EQ. Naturally, he wouldn't kneel on the ground and say things like, if you don't listen to us, we won't get up. This wasn't begging for mercy, it was another form of blackmail. So when Jiang Pingji helped him up, he stood up. This old man was quite prestigious in Jiaoping District. When the other commoners saw that he had gotten up, they helped each other up from the ground. The old man bowed again and said, Magistrate Lu, where are you preparing to go with your troops? Jiang Pingji said, I heard that Qing and Jiaoping and Maolin districts are plagued by bandits from the Xingyi army. The people have no way of making a living, so I came over to clear them out. The members of the Xingyi army in Qinggong district have all been killed. They originally wanted to reorganize in peace. Not long ago they heard that the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district had gathered their troops and horses and left in full strength. They did not know what their purpose was. That's why I brought some troops over to check out the situation. The old man was overjoyed. His eyes brimmed with tears as he said excitedly, What a coincidence. Magistrate Lu didn't know that the bandits in black had indeed left Jiaoping district, leaving only about 1,000 people to guard the county. I've heard that Magistrate Lu is noble and righteous. He led the villagers to get rid of the evil bandits in green. I'm about to rush to Qinggong district to look for Magistrate Lu. If those evil bandits find out about this, I'm afraid they won't let the people of the city go. Jiang Pingji seemed to have finally understood. Is it because of this that the old man asked me? Jiang Pingji asked. The old man raised his hand to wipe the hot tears from the corners of his eyes. He said, Exactly. I only hope that Magistrate Lu is benevolent and righteous. He can protect the innocent people of Jiaoping district so that they won't be harassed by the evil bandits in green. If the county magistrate agrees, this old man can die in peace. Jiang Pingji looked hesitant. The old man's heart was in his throat. Not long after, her eyes became very determined. Since the villagers love me so much, how can I let you down? Jiang Pingji said. When the old man heard the good news, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. His pale face was flushed. Life is like a drama. It all depends on one's acting skills. Watching his lord's perfect performance, even a shameless person like Qiguan Rang was secretly ashamed of her. His lord was so shameless that he could rest assured. In fact, it was not that the old man did not suspect Jiang Pingji's identity. However, she had a noble demeanor. Her face was handsome and upright. The troops behind her were strong and powerful. The clothes that the troops wore were clean and tidy. Their vital parts were covered with leather armor. The weapons they carried were of superior quality. The old man was not ignorant. Just by looking at the lineup, he believed 80% of it. He tested Jiang Pingji's attitude toward Jiaoping district. He saw that she truly pitied the suffering of the people. She spoke eloquently about various methods of disaster relief and saving the people. He thought that the standard of the son of a top aristocratic family was only as good as hers. The old man could not pick out any mistakes. The more he talked, the more satisfied he was. The old man was a rare intellectual and cultured person in Jiaoping district. He was a good teacher. Some children from poor families came to him to study. He would also reduce or exempt their tuition fees at his discretion. He had a very good heart. He acknowledged that Jiang Pingji was the legendary young district magistrate Lu who could create miracles and loved the people like his own children. The other people also believed her with relief. Qiguan Rang led them into the city. Looking at the open city gate of Jiaoping district, he fanned himself with his feather fan. His lord was too capable. He always felt that as a counselor he was facing the dilemma of being laid off and unemployed. They welcomed him all the way to the district headquarters of Jiaoping district. The place had already been occupied by the people. The Xingyi army could also capture and kill them. Jiang Pingji sat calmly on the seat of honor. General Ping Tian of Jiaoping district did not expect that the owner of the nest had already changed hands after they left for just half a day. Outside, the morning light was slightly intoxicating. So far, out of the 4 districts of Fengyi County, 3 districts were already in her hands. Maolin district would probably be hers soon. Li Yun, Su Ku, and the others really did not disappoint Jiang Pingji's high expectations. They took advantage of the night to launch a surprise attack on Maolin district and broke through the city gate. The defense of Maolin district was even weaker than that of Jiaoping district. There were only 2 or 3 guards on the city gate. Li Yun drew his bow and knocked an arrow under the city gate. He shot through the guards on the city wall. With a good start, the morale was greatly boosted. In comparison, Maolin district did not even manage to form a decent attack. The resistance was even weaker and insignificant. The battle was like a hot knife through butter. Using the ladder to climb up the city wall, Li Yun took the lead and rushed to the front. Wherever his silver spear passed, the enemy's corpses were strewn on the spot. Su Ku was well versed in the ways to strike the local morale. Perhaps it could be said that he had become shameless after hanging out with Jiang Pingji for a long time. He ordered the troops to attack forcefully while shouting loudly, "The Xingyi army's destiny is near. The entire army is defeated and fleeing." During this period, reinforcements arrived one after another. However, faced with the tyrannical siege chariots, improved crossbows and ballistae, the Xingyi army charged in batches and died in batches. In addition, the words shouted by the troops caused the Xingyi army's morale to hit rock bottom. They no longer had the will to fight. The Xingyi army was just a motley crew. They had lost their backbone and their morale was low. The number of Xingyi army in Maolin district was pitifully small. The combat power that they could exert as a whole was even more pitiful. In just half a day they had already occupied the entire Maolin district. Compared to the crisis in Xianxia district, the sneak attack and siege battle in Jiaoping district and Maolin district was like a small game. Chapter 527. Feng Jin was probably the only one who knew if he was going to explode. He turned his gaze back to Xiangyang district. The Xingyi army at the west and north gates had been completely defeated. Some were dead and some were injured. Many of the Xingyi army saw that they had lost the upper hand. They panicked and ran away, leaving thousands of corpses behind them. Looking at the mess on the ground, Feng Jin raised his hand to wipe his face with a solemn expression. He wiped away the blood on his face. He asked the soldier in a hoarse voice, "How's the situation at the south gate?" The sky gradually turned from black to greenish-white. The sun rose from the horizon and dispersed the darkness. Looking at the sky, the battle at the south gate should have already started. He just didn't know the situation. The soldier panted heavily. The man said, "The battle at the south gate is in a stalemate. General Luo is leading his men to resist. Feng Jin looked at the city gate that was blocked by bricks with pity. If he had enough men around him, why would he need to block the city gate? If he didn't block the city gate, he could send a team with high mobility to harass the Xingyi army from the back and attack their morale. Both sides wouldn't have fought for so long. The defense line of the city wall was almost broken by the Xingyi army. This made Feng Jin rather vexed. He glanced at the crowd and said, "The wounded should all rest. Except for those guarding the city gate, the rest should leave the city with me." After blocking the west and north gates, they could still go out from the east gate. They could outflank the Xingyi army from the back and harass them. As long as the south gate was strong, the Xingyi army couldn't take it down after a long time, and the back was harassed many times. Their morale would definitely plummet. A soldier was covered in blood. He looked like a bloody man and was in a terrible state. He stopped Feng Jin. "Sir, you mustn't. You just need to tell us what to do. There's no need to risk leaving the city." Feng Jin said resolutely, "I'm not powerless. I can protect myself. Soldiers, there's no need to say more." The soldiers were physically strong. The high-intensity training in the military camp was not just for show. After a night of fierce fighting, they still had energy. However, Feng Jin was the son of an aristocratic family who lived an exquisite life. His body was better than ordinary people, but compared to these rough men, he was still a lot weaker. Now even he could grit his teeth and say to continue fighting. The other soldiers naturally had high morale and were eager to fight. The situation at the south gate was slightly better than Feng Jin's side. Relatively speaking, it was easier to defend. Even though the Xingyi army at the south gate had more people than the north and west gates, they did not have as many siege weapons. Without sufficient siege weapons, the losses of forcibly attacking a city would be quite terrifying. Luo Yue was also an experienced person. His defense was airtight. It made it difficult for the Xingyi army below to move an inch. Even so, the soldiers on the city wall were exhausted. There were always soldiers who were shot by arrows. If they were lucky, they would only be lightly injured. If they were unlucky, they would lose their lives. However, no one had the time to mourn. They could only focus on dealing with the enemy. Just as Jiang Pingji had said, there were only the living and the dead on the battlefield. There was no distinction between men and women. Looking at the tacit cooperation of the troops, Luo Yue felt a little emotional. He gradually agreed with the women's battalion that his lord had established. If all the women stayed behind to support their husbands and raise their children, it would indeed be a waste of nearly half of the human resources. After going through rigorous training, they were able to fight on the battlefield with weapons in hand. Their performance was no worse than that of the male soldiers. In today's world, women and children were seen as a vulnerable group and needed protection. However, most of the men could not even protect themselves. How could they protect them? Even if Luo Yue's views made him feel that women should not go to the battlefield, his rationality told him that this was not wrong. If others could not protect them, why couldn't they work hard to protect themselves? 10,000 troops were more than enough to defend Xiangyang district. But what about Qingan district, Maolin district and Jiaoping district? It was almost a fantasy to rely on 10,000 troops to defend a district. It could be predicted that after conquering the other 3 districts, it was imperative to expand the troops. However, the north had experienced a series of natural and man-made disasters. There was a huge loss of young and strong men. When the time came, it was unknown how many soldiers they could recruit. If there were more female soldiers, it would indeed greatly relieve the pressure on the military camp. With these thoughts in his mind, Luo Yue continued to command calmly. He thought that there would be a stalemate for a while. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden commotion from the rear of the Xingyi army. The originally orderly attack instantly became a mess. Using the height of the city wall, Luo Yue could see the movement from afar. His eyes lit up and his heart flashed with ecstasy. Soldiers, the Xingyi army at the north and west gates have all been killed. He raised his arm and shouted. The troops seemed to have been injected with a shot of adrenaline. Joy flashed across their originally tired faces. The north and west gates had already won? Everyone knew that Xiangyang district was attacked from both front and back. While the troops at the south gate defended against the Xingyi army, they were afraid that their rear would be breached by the enemy. Now Luo Yue told them that the rear was safe. They only needed to defeat the enemy at the front. How could they not be excited? The morale of their troops rose again and again. The Xingyi army's morale continued to decline. Feng Jin led the troops to charge forward and make a detour to harass them. The city gate was impregnable. The Xingyi army attacked for a long time without success. Behind them there were cavalry harassing them. After a few times the morale of the Xingyi army had already plummeted. They were not in the mood to fight at all. Their defeat was irreversible. No matter how their leader shouted, the Xingyi army still fled in all directions. The attack below the city gate became weaker and weaker. They were unable to pose a threat to the city gate. Feng Jin originally wanted to lead the troops to chase after them. However, when he thought of the current defensive strength of Xiangyang district, he could only give up this tempting idea. Luo Yue wiped the bloodstains on his face. He bowed to Feng Jin and said, "Thank you for rushing over to help." The battle at the south gate lasted for more than 2 hours. However, the battle at the north and west gates started at 4 in the morning. Moreover, it was a battle at night. It consumed a lot of energy. Looking at Feng Jin, he must have led the troops to help the south gate right after the battle ended. If not for that, even if Luo Yue had the confidence to defend the south gate, he would have to use up a lot of defensive equipment. Feng Jin took some time to catch his breath. He raised his hand to help Luo Yue up. He said, "Coach Luo Yue, you don't have to thank me. This is what I should do." Luo Yue looked at the direction in which the Xingyi army fled in resentment. He said fiercely, "It's a pity that they escaped." Generally speaking, when the defeated side fled and lost the will to fight, it was a good opportunity for the victorious side to expand their victory. Now that he saw the remnants of the Xingyi army leave, Luo Yue naturally felt bad. Feng Jin said, "It's okay. This debt will be repaid one day." Little did they know that the Xingyi army that they said escaped by luck were very unlucky. Chapter 528. She left Qiguanrang behind in Jiaoping district. She had the final say in everything. At his command, Dabai sprinted off into the distance, taking the lead as fast as he could. The Xingyi army in Maolin district lost their morale. They fled pathetically and were utterly defeated. After they ran for a distance, a few chieftains began to organize their men. Naturally, they moved slowly. When they managed to organize more than half of the defeated soldiers, they would face a new disaster. A small chieftain spat on the ground and said unhappily, "What do you mean by Xiangyang district is empty of troops? F***ck, does this look like it's empty of troops? It's harder to chew than a bone. Not only is it hard to chew, but it's also hard to chew. We suffered a huge loss this time." The accomplice beside him sat on the ground and wiped his face with both hands. He said fiercely, "We'll remember this today. We'll make those people in Xiangyang district pay the price in the future. They made us suffer such a huge loss. We can't let it go easily." There were also some who looked into the distance dejectedly. No one knew what they were thinking. In the distance, the Xingyi army gathered in 2s and 3s. Each of them was hunchbacked and had ashen faces. They looked like defeated roosters. There was no valiant and high-spirited aura on them. It made people feel unhappy and secretly scolded them for being a bunch of good-for-nothings. Some of the small chieftains were very unhappy with these soldiers who swayed according to the situation. It was just a defeat. Was there a need to be like this? Weren't they still alive? As long as they were alive, there would be a day when they would make a comeback. These useless people ran away faster than anyone else when they saw that the situation was not good. Now we'll organize our men and return to Maolin district first before making plans. They originally wanted to take advantage of the situation. Who knew that not only did they not take advantage of the situation, they were also counterattacked. It was really embarrassing. They could not covet the fat piece of meat that was Xiangyang district. Now they had to bring their men back first to prevent the rear from being empty for too long. The leader of the Xingyi army then remembered that there was a shortage of manpower in his backyard. However, he was not very worried. Anyway, Maolin district had been exploited cleanly. There was no profit to be reaped. The nearby Xingyi army did not even look at it. Why would they covet it? However, they all forgot that the other Xingyi army would indeed not covet it. However, it did not mean that Jiang Pingji was not tempted. Now the 4 districts of Fengyi district were in her hands. She was now the district magistrate of Xiangyang district in name, but in reality she was the chief of Fengyi district. Not to mention Dongqing, even in other countries, was there a county chief younger than her. Jiang Pingji was completely confident that within a year, Fengyi County would be revitalized and prosperous once again. After Fengyi district was settled, the next step would be the entire Wanzhou. The members of the Xingyi army who had gathered were completely unaware of the impending danger. They sat on the ground in twos and threes, their stomachs rumbling with hunger. The weapons in their hands had already been abandoned when they escaped. Hungry and tired, many of them simply found a place to sleep. Looking at the disorderly Xingyi army, a few leaders were so angry that their faces and necks turned red. They wished they could whip these people to wake them up. There are actually no pursuers coming from Xiangyang district. A small leader opened his mouth in surprise. The other person was slightly more knowledgeable and replied, "They didn't go out of the city to pursue them. It's most likely because there aren't enough people in the city to hold them back." The leader said, "Men in had in. It's hard to deal with them when they don't have enough men. What would happen if they had enough men? Don't boost others' morale and belittle your own. Maybe they think there's no need to chase. Even if they don't have enough men in the city, can you break in?" His companion was speechless. They looked at each other in silence, helplessness in their eyes. It was a good thing that the enemy did not chase after them. Xingyi army had more time to organize their men. Just as they heaved a sigh of relief, a member of the Xingyi army scrambled over to report. "General, the enemy is coming from afar." What? The enemy was chasing after them? The leaders of the Xingyi army were shocked. One of them, a strong man with a dark face, asked, "Enemy? How many?" The pitiful member of the Xingyi army stuttered, "The enemy is moving very fast. We can't be sure of their numbers." "Useless. What's the use of your eyes?" The strong man with a dark face angrily grabbed the man's collar. He lifted him up and threw him on the ground. The member of the Xingyi army rolled twice in the mud. He fell until he was dizzy and saw stars. "I'll go take a look." The member of the Xingyi army snorted. He strode to the place where he could see the enemy. He didn't know if he didn't see, but he was shocked when he saw. Indeed, as the member of the Xingyi army said, the enemy was moving very fast. They were only a few hundred meters away from them. Behind them there was a thick cloud of dust. It was like the sound of horse hooves. It was impossible to determine the size of the troops chasing after them. However, there were hundreds of enemies running out from the cloud of dust. There were at least 3,000 pursuers. The other side had 3,000 victorious troops, valiant and high-spirited. Although their side still had nearly 4,000 men, they were all exhausted and had no battle experience at all. If the two sides were to clash, they would have no chance of victory. They could only experience the feeling of being utterly defeated once again. At that moment, the leaders couldn't help but want to retreat. They wanted to escape as soon as possible. As long as there's life, there's hope. As for the members of the Xingyi army on the ground, what did their lives have to do with them? On the other side, Jiang Pingji was leading 500 people to charge forward. The remaining 300 people came out in batches from the cloud of dust. She made use of this camp to create the illusion of a large army chasing after them. In reality, she only got a few soldiers to chop a few trees. Then she dragged the branches and ran back and forth on the ground, raising a thick cloud of dust. There were many flaws in this plan, but it could deceive the Xingyi army for a while. The audience in the streaming room saw that she was so cunning. They all ridiculed her. Dagu sells straw shoes. By the way, when you used this plan to deceive people, did you think about Lord Zhongfei's feelings? Ergu Wu Dideo. Sai, it's rare for Lord Zhongfei to be smart for once. His plan was plagiarized by the streamer. I'm upset. Of course, the crux of the problem was not the plan, but the deception. As long as they were deceived, based on their dispirited mentality after suffering a defeat, the possibility of them fighting again was extremely small. Even if they fought, their combat power was not enough. Jiang Pingji was completely confident that she could lead 700 to 800 people to surround and annihilate the 3,000 to 4,000 members of the Xingyi army. The pursuers are here. Everyone get up. The pursuers are here. Run away quickly. There were loud shouts. Many members of the Xingyi army woke up from their sleep. When they heard that there were pursuers, their bodies had already reacted one step ahead of their minds. Run. The further the better. Most of the members of the Xingyi army were running blindly. One could imagine how little resistance Jiang Pingji encountered. White excitedly increased its speed. The Xingyi army was just a tired and defeated army. How could they outrun it? Some members of the Xingyi army saw that they could not escape, so they simply turned around and wanted to fight to the death. They did not expect that they could not even get close to it. White raised its front hoofs high and rewarded them with a hoof. It hit their chest. They heard the sound of bones breaking. One by one they fell to the ground, spitting out blood and breathing weakly. Jiang Pingji waved the sharp spear in her hand. Her moves were very simple. Every move and style was bound to reap lives. Wherever White passed, the person and the horse cooperated well with each other. Chapter 529. Mr. Qiguan, we've really tried our best. The troops who were charging behind Jiang Pingji watched as their lord left in a cloud of dust. They could only eat dirt at the back. One could imagine the despair in their hearts. Qiguan Rang was left behind in Jiaoping district. He secretly instructed many troops to keep a close eye on their lord and not let her be too reckless. Even a few strategists could not stop their lord. How could a group of small soldiers like them keep a close eye on her? Killing could make people lose all rationality. The troops behind them were in high spirits. Only a few hundred of them could chase after thousands of members of the Xingyi army and kill them. The latter only cared about fleeing in all directions. They could not organize any effective defense. No matter how the leaders threatened them, the members of the Xingyi army only cared about running for their lives. Jiang Pingji looked at their performance and snorted contemptuously. Her hands did not stop moving. After killing for a while, there were hundreds of corpses along the way. White's fur was already scarlet. Jiang Pingji then shouted loudly. Maolin district has already been conquered. You'll be throwing your lives away if you run back. Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who resist will be killed without mercy. What? Maolin district has already been conquered? Under the influence of the environment, the leaders of the Xingyi army also knew that the situation was hopeless. If they did not escape, they would die. They broke into a run, but they did not expect that their old nest had already been destroyed. They were still thinking of going back to regroup and take revenge in the future. Now that they had lost their territory and foundation, how could they make a comeback? Disheartened, many members of the Xingyi army gave up on escaping and resisting. There were still some who chose to continue struggling. At that moment, the members of the Xingyi army who were running at the front heard a faint battle cry. They took a closer look and saw that the enemy troops were also charging towards them. There was a blockade in front and pursuers behind. The members of the Xingyi army could not escape even if they had wings. In the blink of an eye, a glaring silver light flashed before their eyes. There was only a red blood stain left between their brows. Fresh blood flowed out from the wound. Their bodies fell forward due to inertia, then they fell to the ground with a loud bang. They fell on the muddy grass with a dull thud. Kill. Li Yun's words were concise and comprehensive. His voice was low and stern, causing one to involuntarily feel invigorated and have goosebumps. The audience in the live streaming room had a wider field of vision. From afar they could see the Xingyi army's abnormal movements in front of them. Their fleeing formation was in a mess, as if they were hindered by something. They zoomed in to take a look. What the F***CK? That white horse with a silver spear, isn't that Han Mei? Tian monthly tickets break 2000. Super tacit understanding. My husband is coming. Wei Qiging, that's too much. Han Mei's husband is so handsome that I can't close my legs. Han Mei on the battlefield, can't get enough of him. Gossipy since I was young. That's right, that's right. Han Mei on the battlefield is like a Prince Charming. The screen is a little dirty, let me lick it. No, speaking of which, why am I, a man, being smitten with another man here? Oh no, I feel like I'm done for. Yuan shrimp sticks. You vulgar people, am I the only one who noticed that Han Mei's horse doesn't have a stirrup? Herbivorous numbers. I despise the person above. We are vulgar, aren't you filthy? It's filthy. Yeching Zhou. The newbie doesn't understand what's the joke about not having a stirrup. Tian Lingfeng. Come, I'll tell you what the joke is. Without a stirrup, it's good to ride a horse with a strong waist. You know. It was a hot-blooded and serious scene. The audience in the streaming room was still licking Jiang Pingji's heroic figure a second ago. In the next moment the scene changed and they were infatuated with Li Yun. Not only were they infatuated, they were even driving in the streaming room. This group of fickle goblins. Jiang Pingji and Li Yun obviously didn't communicate with each other. The pincer attack was just a coincidence. The Xingyi army's luck was too bad. She only brought 800 elites with her, and Li Yun didn't have many men on his side either. The two of them added up to less than 1,500 men. However, the morale of the troops on both sides was like a rainbow. Even though they were on a long journey, under the influence and motivation of the battlefield's murderous atmosphere, everyone felt that their bodies had inexhaustible energy. Li Yun was fighting for a while when he noticed Jiang Pingji and her men chasing after the Xingyi army. He was overjoyed. The Lord is just ahead. Let's go and support her. Meng Hun and Su Ku stayed behind in Maolin district to prevent other forces from launching a sneak attack. Li Yun and Jiang Nongqin led a few hundred men to prepare for a sneak attack on the Xingyi army's rear. However, they didn't expect their timing to be so coincidental. They just happened to bump into the Xingyi army fleeing in all directions. Jiang Nongqin said in a hoarse voice, "Generals and soldiers, follow me to attack and support the Lord." Jiang Nongqin learned from Jiang Pingji and Meng Hun. She dismounted from her horse and used a short weapon, but she preferred to use a long spear when fighting on a horse. Due to the limitation of her strength, she also walked lightly and nimbly. She moved as soon as she touched the ground. As a result, the requirement of aiming the spear was stricter. Only by killing with one blow would her chances of survival on the battlefield be higher. Li Yun and Jiang Nongqin had fought several times. They had a tacit understanding. Both of them coordinated with each other and their lethality was stronger. He ordered the horse under him to gallop and turned his body to avoid the sneak arrows. Looks like Xiangyang district and Maolin district are safe. Jiang Nongqin responded with a hum and didn't say anything else. Li Yun didn't mind her coldness, and the battlefield wasn't suitable for frequent communication. At this moment he was deeply moved by the capabilities of the few masters. They really never suffered losses no matter where they went. Maolin district almost turned out in full force. Even so, they didn't gain any advantage in Xiangyang district. Instead, they were utterly defeated and chased by their lord's troops. Li Yun's face darkened. Not a trace of his usual adorable self could be seen. He held the silver spear in his hands steadily, killing people accurately and swiftly. There were hundreds of troops following behind him. Most of them were male, but there were also female troops. Although the overall quality of women couldn't be compared to that of men, every group had its advantages and disadvantages. The female troops that accompanied him were the cream of the crop. Their stamina and willpower were exceptionally strong. They didn't complain or show any signs of frailty as they hurried on their journey, causing people to involuntarily overlook their gender. Not to mention Li Yun, who was leading the troops, even the other male troops and even the female troops themselves slowly overlooked this point. Kill. When a group of hungry wild wolves charged into a herd of panicking sheep, what would it look like? The Xingyi army saw that they had nowhere to run, so they could only brace themselves and face the enemy head-on. But how could they defeat the enemy who had an imposing aura? They were utterly defeated the moment they met face to face. Jiang Pingji shouted again, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who don't surrender will be killed without mercy." When she realized that Li Yun had led his troops over, Jiang Pingji knew that she had already occupied the entire Fingyi district. But apart from Xiangyang district, the other three districts were almost completely devoured by the Xingyi army. The people had all left their homes. This meant that when Jiang Pingji rebuilt the three districts, she would have no one to use. Rather than killing the Xingyi army in front of her, she might as well keep them as laborers. Chapter 530. Subordinate Li Yun greets my lord. Subordinate Jiang Nongqin greets my lord. After clearing the battlefield and capturing the captives, Li Yun and Jiang Nongqin led their respective horses to Jiang Pingji and half-knelt to pay their respects. Jiang Pingji leaned against a withered tree on the open ground and held a weed in her mouth. She said, "Get up, sit down and rest." Li Yun was startled. Jiang Nongqin sat beside Jiang Pingji with a cold face. "Nongqin is indeed cuter. Hanmei, you are so restrained." It doesn't feel like you are your usual self. She was a cute little angel on a daily basis and a cold and aloof Prince Charming on the battlefield. That was the most attractive contrast. There was no need to be restrained. He did not care about that. Li Yun looked slightly embarrassed. He simply found a place to sit down and placed the silver spear in his hand beside him. He asked, "Why are you here, my lord?" Jiang Pingji said, "Naturally, I am here in the same way you are here. How can a place like Jiaoping district be difficult for me?" Li Yun scratched his head and said shyly, "My lord is dignified and wise. The Tsingyi army is naturally no match for you." Jiang Nongqin had a quiet personality. She usually listened quietly. Unless she really had an opinion, she would not speak up easily. Therefore she did not join the conversation. Jiang Pingji turned her head and asked Jiang Nongqin, "How are the results of your attack on Maolin district?" The latter was stunned for a moment. She reacted after a while and said, "The Tsingyi army has few guards in Maolin district. Officer Meng is experienced in battles. Mr. Su is resourceful. Therefore it did not take long for us to take over Maolin district. The generals and soldiers fought bravely. Other than 20 people who were lightly injured, 6 were seriously injured and 8 were killed in battle. The rest of the soldiers were safe and sound. The 6 seriously injured soldiers were an accident. If they had not let their guard down, at most one would have been slightly injured. As for the 8 who died in battle, they were shot by the enemy's stray arrows at the beginning of the sneak attack on the city. They died of untreated wounds. It was already very proud to have such an outcome in a sneak attack on the city. Not to mention that there were many inexperienced new soldiers among them. There were also female soldiers who were purely holding them back in the eyes of others. Of course, only the soldiers participating in the battle could judge whether or not they were holding them back. Outsiders had no right or qualification to comment. Take care of the injured soldiers, and let the souls of the fallen warriors return to their homeland. Have their corpses been properly disposed of? Although the casualties were small, they were still there. The dead could not be resurrected, but she could make up for the families of the living and the dead. It was a form of comfort and compensation. Jiang Nongqin secretly glanced at Li Yun. His expression was natural and he was not displeased by Jiang Pingji's cold treatment. She calmed down and continued, "Rest assured, my lord. The corpses of the soldiers have all been collected. Those that can be buried have already been buried." The audience in the streaming room were mostly fans of Li Yun's looks or true love. The little angel was treated coldly by the streamer and was inexplicably unhappy. Kneeling begging for monthly tickets. "Hey host, did you see our little angel Han Mei's longing eyes? Look at him. Otherwise will now. Poor little angel, don't panic. Come to my arms, I'll give you a loving hug." Sapa. Is this the post-battle summary report? Our little angel Han Mei knows it too. The streamer can't favor one and discriminate against the other. Xinglai Mai, don't panic. Han Mei is not a narrow-minded person. Why would he feel wronged? Jiang Pingji unintentionally glanced at the bullet screen and was secretly amused. She continued to ask Nongqin about the arrangements in Maolin district and sent a bullet screen to explain so that Han Mei's fan club would not continue to lash out at her and say that she bullied their husband. Host V. Han Mei is the deputy captain of the Vanguard Battalion. Nongqin is the captain of the female battalion. Naturally, I can't ask about the situation without Nongqin's permission. Jiang Pingji liked to do whatever she wanted, but it did not mean that she would let her guard down when it came to certain matters of principle. The military camp was a place with clear hierarchy and strict discipline. Her attitude would affect their status among the soldiers. If she treated Jiang Nongqin coldly, it would give the soldiers the misconception that she, the captain, was inferior to the deputy captain. Unintentionally, it would weaken Nongqin's prestige among the soldiers. Even if the weakening was very slight, Jiang Pingji did not want that to happen. Alright, since the streamer had explained, the audience in the streaming room also expressed their understanding. They turned around and showered gifts. The accompanying comments were, "Touch my little angel. Little angel is not sad. Come over and let auntie rub you," making Jiang Pingji feel helpless. Jiang Pingji then asked about the general situation in Maolin district. After all, it had to be rebuilt after the war. How could a place that had been ravaged by locusts like the Tsingyi army be prosperous? Jiang Pingji still used Xiangyang district as her base camp, but her influence had already spread to the whole of Fengyi County. Jiang Nongqing was a careful person. She did not expect Jiang Pingji to ask her, but she had made all the necessary preparations. Since the Lord valued her, she would naturally tell her everything she knew. She did not hold back and did not leave anything out. Jiang Pingji's brows furrowed imperceptibly. If the financial situation of the three districts was ranked, Qingan district was the poorest, followed by Maolin district, and Jiaoping district was in the best condition. However, the situation of population loss in the three districts was similar. It was not to say that 9 out of 10 houses were empty, but it was sparsely populated. Forget it, rebuilding is not something that can be done in a day. Although there are fewer people, it is not a ghost town. The captives of the Xingyi army can be used as laborers, which can relieve a lot of pressure. I'll ask Xiaoyu and the rest to put up notices to recruit laborers and slowly rebuild the three districts. There were benefits to having fewer people. Many houses and lands had become ownerless. She could use them to her heart's content to seek benefits. The larger Jiang Pingji's territory was, the stronger her military force was. In the eyes of outsiders, her place was a paradise in a chaotic world. When the time came, it was unknown how many people and wealthy merchants would be attracted to seek refuge. Well, think about the houses in Xiangyang district. The prices had gone from being worthless to increasing every day. Recently, wealthy merchants had sent their servants to inquire. The land and house deeds were all in Jiang Pingji's hands. She was still unwilling to let them go. It was too much of a loss to sell them now. When Fengyi County was completely stabilized, these houses could only be sold at the proper price. However, her military force was only about 10,000 people. If they were spread out and scattered across the 4 districts, it was really a stretch. It was imperative to recruit soldiers and expand the military force. During the early stages of rebuilding, it was probably the most dangerous time for Jiang Pingji's power. The territory was too big and the military force was too scattered. If they were caught by the enemy, they might be overturned. However, she believed that her strategists were smart people. Even if she did not send any instructions, they would know what to do during this period of time. Facts proved that whether it was Jiaoping district's Qiguan Rang, Qingan district's Wei Ci, or Maolin district's Su Ku, they were all great teammates. Having just conquered the 3 districts, the 3 of them coincidentally recruited usable laborers. On the other hand, they had to think of a way to make the 1,000 or 2,000 troops look like 10,000 people. They had to strengthen the patrols and throw smoke bombs to confuse the possible enemies so that they would not dare to act rashly. Xiangyang district had won 2 consecutive battles, which could more or less deter the enemies who coveted it. Chapter 531. The changes in power in Fengyi County did not attract much attention. Apart from the Xingyi army that suffered heavy losses and the Red Lotus group that fought the Xingyi army to death, the north was still quiet. On the contrary, the flames of war in the south had already ignited and caused a chain reaction. Prince Changshu had sent the corpse of Lu Shi's mistress, Lu Huan, to Chongzhou. His original intention was to use this to rope Lu Shi in and have him stand on the same side as himself. Who knew that Lu Shi was indifferent? After receiving the coffin of his mistress, he did not even make a sound. Lu Shi's heartless and indifferent reaction made Prince Changshu furious. Not only did the hatred in his heart deepen, but he also remembered Lu Shi. However, he could not do anything to Lu Shi for the time being. He could only wait for him to ascend the throne before settling the score. However, even though Prince Changshu schemed to drive a wedge between the emperor and Huang Song, making Huang Song withdraw from the front line and become the district magistrate of Diang district, he still could not successfully take over Qinzhou. He also could not pull his brother, the emperor, down from the throne. Why did this happen? It was because his chief strategist had jumped ship. Speaking of this, one had to mention that Prince Changshu became increasingly arrogant and exposed his true nature. Since the last time Lu Shi secretly sent someone to send a letter to Prince Changshu, letting him know that Lu Huan, Lu Shi's daughter, was Prince Changshu's biological daughter, he lost his composure and embarrassed his chief strategist. After that, when the war came to a stalemate, Prince Changshu thought that the strategist was incompetent and repeatedly embarrassed him. Not only that, when the military generals questioned the correctness of the strategist's strategy, Prince Changshu also added insult to injury. Thus, Prince Xianxia completely offended the capable strategist in his camp. It was all right to offend an ordinary person. Anyway, ordinary people were not capable, so Prince Xianxia was not afraid. However, he offended a petty and vengeful strategist. The key was that the strategist really had a brain, so it was awkward. Before the strategist jumped ship, he even schemed against Prince Xianxia, causing him to make a major mistake in the battle to attack Qinzhou. His troops were severely depleted and his vitality was severely damaged. It was precisely because of this that the forces in Qinzhou who were in imminent danger were saved, allowing them to take a breather and counterattack. However, the strategist was smart. He did not expose himself before he did something bad and pushed the blame to others. Successfully shifting the blame to Prince Xianxia, the strategist jumped ship and left. Prince Xianxia was too ashamed to vent his anger on him. The facts proved that the strategist's approach was correct. Prince Xianxia's front line failed. He was about to break through Qinzhou's defense line and deploy his troops to the new capital, but he made a huge mistake, causing half of his elite troops to be devoured by Qinzhou, causing him to suffer a great loss. In this short period of time he could only look at Qinzhou helplessly, unable to deal a devastating blow to Qinzhou. After losing the battle, Prince Xianxia thought of this adorable strategist and randomly sent a small soldier to call him over. The tent was empty. The strategist had already packed his bags and left. Before he left, he even left a letter. The content of the letter was naturally not something like, "I'm leaving, you heartless man. You've betrayed my trust, I don't want to be with you anymore," or something like that. Instead, it was a tearful complaint about his sick mother at home and that she would die soon. As a filial son, he wanted to go home to serve his mother and send her off. Reading this letter that was filled with sorrow and filial piety, Prince Xianxia could not vent his anger no matter how angry he was, not to mention that he was the one in the wrong. He treated the strategist coldly and did not even know that the strategist's mother was seriously ill. Now that the strategist had left to be filial to his mother, Prince Xianxia felt that he should send him some generous gifts to express his sincerity. At this moment, Prince Xianxia still did not know that his strategist had not left temporarily. He had gone far away. Even his defeat at the front line was caused by the strategist. It was fine if he did not know the truth, but when he knew, he would probably have the urge to eat him alive. Prince Xianxia did not think of chasing him back. Firstly, he would lose face. After losing the battle, he hurriedly went to find the strategist he had been cold to for a long time, as if he could not leave him. How could he put his face? Secondly, he had a lot of talents under him. Did he lack this one? Naturally, he did not lack one. Therefore, it was fine for him to be filial to his mother. When he returned after the filial piety, his status would be even lower. Prince Xianxia casually threw the bamboo slip letter aside, then ordered his men to summon the other strategists to prepare to discuss the follow-up matters. What about the strategist who had quietly left for 3 days? He had already left with his page boy and half a carriage of books. These books were all copied by him using the bamboo paper provided by Prince Xianxia. Although it was only half a carriage and could only hold 1 or 2 boxes, if it was made into bamboo slips, it would probably not even be enough to fill 20 carriages. Although Prince Xianxia was not a good person, when he was good to people he was really good. Knowing that this chief strategist liked to read, he tried his best to cater to his interests and gave him all kinds of precious books. This strategist also saw through Prince Xianxia's nature. He knew that he would not be under Prince Xianxia for long, so wouldn't he copy as much as he could? The page boy who was driving the carriage asked, "Sir, where are we going now?" The strategist studied in the carriage and said casually, "Anywhere is fine, but not in the south." The south was the battlefield between Prince Xianxia and the Dongqing royal family. Now that Prince Xianxia's vitality was greatly damaged, his original advantage was reduced to dust, causing the two forces to return to the starting line. They still had a lot to grind. If he continued to stay in the south, what if he accidentally encountered Prince Xianxia's forces? Yes, the strategist's so-called old mother is seriously ill, was just an excuse. In fact, he did not even know who his biological mother was. He grew up with the help of his teachers. According to his teachers, his biological mother might be a prostitute, because he was found in that place. The swaddling clothes he was wrapped in were considered rich, unlike a child from a poor family. However, this was old history that did not need to be investigated. The strategist did not care at all. The page boy had a bitter face. He said while driving the carriage, "There has to be a place. We can't just run away in fear, can we? The world is so chaotic now. I heard that after Nanxing was destroyed, it was a mess. The feudal lords rose and Dongqing was also in chaos. It's easy to get into trouble if you run around blindly." The strategist lifted the curtain impatiently and said with a frown, "In the past I've always said that I'm long-winded and meddlesome. Now that it's your turn to be in charge, why are you blaming me? I'll let you make the decision. You can run wherever you want to run." The page boy's face grew bitter. How could there be such a stubborn and difficult teacher? After thinking for a while he said, "Sir, didn't you admire that person called Huang? I heard that he was demoted to Deyang district. I remember that Deyang district is in Maoda County of Haozhou. It's close to the north, far away from the center of the war in the south and out of reach of the war in the north. Let's go there." The strategist rolled the book in his hand and gently knocked the back of the page boy's head. Chapter 532. This little boy servant of his was really petty. When the strategist was working for Prince Changshu's camp, he came up with a plan to trick Huang Song. Huang Song was probably extremely resentful towards this black pot that fell from the sky. If Huang Song knew that it was his idea and that he was the one who instigated Prince Changshu, how could he not bear a grudge? How was this going to seek refuge? It was clearly courting death. Although it was a critical remark, there was a hint of joy and amusement in his tone. One could tell that he was not angry at the boy servant's pettiness. The boy servant naturally understood his master's temper. He was even more certain that the other party would not be angry because of this and would even be eager to try. He said, "Sir, your strategy is unparalleled. If that Huang something is really as good as you say, he won't blame you." The strategist clicked his tongue and immediately entered the carriage. He leaned against the table and spoke lazily. "Up to you." The boy servant smiled and said, "All right, let's go to Deyang district now." Daily pitting master and servant against each other, January 1st. Completed. Nowadays the world was unstable and the people's hearts were in chaos. The knowledgeable people in the world were not optimistic about the Dongqing royal family or Prince Changshu. No matter who won, they would not be able to restore light to this chaotic world. They also did not have the ability or magnanimity to set things right. Since the fall of the Great Xia dynasty, the world was divided into 5 countries. The 5 countries had been established for a short period of time. Those celebrities could not be said to be patriotic at all. Since the world was muddy and unclear, a new world would be created and light would be restored. In this world there were countless people who chased after fame and profit. As long as there was profit to be made, there would naturally be no shortage of people who chased after it. Some people wanted to support a wise ruler and leave his name in the annals of history, a good name that would last for 10,000 years. This strategist was no exception. Before Prince Changshu revealed his true nature, he indeed had the appearance of a wise ruler. To put it bluntly, he was good at acting. In addition, he was Prince Changshu of the Dongqing royal family. He had a fertile and vast fief and a strong army. He had a very strong capital to fight for the world. However, he was not a patient person and his acting skills were not refined to perfection. It did not take long before he revealed all his flaws. After seeing this person's true colors, the strategist did not want to assist such a terrible person. A good bird chose a tree to rest in and a virtuous minister chose a master to serve. If he could meet a suitable master, he would naturally do his best. If he met an unsuitable one, he would jump ship as soon as possible and find a suitable one. However, since they had worked together for a while, the strategist did not want to go against his old master for the time being. Under the setting sun, the carriage slowly drove toward Deyang district. He wanted to see if this capable Huang Song was really capable and how broad-minded he was. He cherished his life but liked to play with it. The boy servant knew his temperament very well. Otherwise, he would not have suggested that the two of them go to Deyang district. The further north they went, the more refugees there were. Barren fields, starving people, dilapidated ruins. Everything impacted the duo's eyes. However, the strategist had seen many things and he had a cold personality, so he did not reveal any complicated expressions. On the other hand, the errand boy was still somewhat innocent and kind. When he saw the numb refugees or the crying children, he sighed with emotion. However, he remembered his identity and did not give them any food or money. In fact, he did not even stay for long. When one was outside and the world was so chaotic, kindness sometimes could not be exchanged for gratitude. It might even lead to killing intent. For safety's sake, the errand boy used a skinny old horse to drive the carriage. He changed his clothes into old clothes with many patches, and the carriage that the strategist sat in was also changed into a dusty old carriage. However, the interior of the carriage was more comfortable and clean. With such a combination, as long as they did not encounter refugees who were driven to a dead end, they would generally be fine. The strategist merely raised his eyebrows at this arrangement and did not comment on it. The errand boy took care of his daily life and had always been reliable and considerate. He washed, cooked, sewed, drove, repaired, and survived in the wild. As long as he had this little errand boy with him, he did not have to worry about his life being uncomfortable. Even if he was thrown on an uninhabited deserted island, he would still be able to live comfortably. Sir, in this current world, when do you think it will be peaceful? The errand boy was still in his 20s. His hair was tied up in a small bun. Coupled with his chubby little face, he looked even younger. The strategist answered without raising his head, "I'm not a god. How would I know these things?" The errand boy said, "But aren't you determined to assist a wise ruler to help the common people in the world? The person you chose should be able to do this." The strategist bought this errand boy from a starving refugee for only 12 copper coins. It was originally just a moment of kindness, but he did not expect the errand boy to have a pure heart and was very grateful to others. The strategist simply raised him as a younger brother. However, it seemed that he had raised him too much, causing the errand boy to have extra confidence and admiration for him. Who knows? Maybe a few years, maybe a few decades. Maybe when I'm in the coffin, the world will still be chaotic. The carriage was pulled by an old horse, so it naturally could not be fast. They could only travel slowly. After traveling for a few days, the master and servant ordered a big bowl of tea in a shabby tea house. Some tea leaves floated on the muddy water, and the taste of the tea was quite touching. However, the strategist drank it without a frown. Instead, the errand boy complained that he had been wronged. The master and servant dressed low-key, looking like a poor family. While they were drinking tea, they heard someone talking about Fingyi County. "Have you heard that the damned Xingyi bastards in Fingyi County have been chased out? Who is so powerful? I heard that even the county chief of Fingyi County wagged his tail at the Xingyi army. Someone actually chased them out. I heard that it's the district magistrate of Xiangyang County called Lu Shi. I heard that Xiangyang County was once the territory of the Xingyi army, but didn't the government make Lu Shi a district magistrate? Last year he directly led his men to beat up the bastards in Xiangyang County and even incorporated them into his army. The north suffered from the torment of the Xingyi army and the Red Lotus group. Many people left their homes and fled to the south. Although there was also a war in the south, they still cared about their reputation and would not be as reckless and violent as the two bandits. Coincidentally, there were also refugees who escaped from Fingyi County in the tea house. When they heard the news about their hometown, they could not help but ask, "Then what about Qingan district?" "I escaped from Qingan district. Were the Xingyi bastards there also beaten up?" The person who told the news said, "They have already been beaten up. Qingan district has now been taken back by the district magistrate Lu Shi." The commoner was overjoyed when he heard that, but he immediately hesitated. It was not easy for him to escape from Qingan district. Who knew what would happen in the future? If he went back rashly, he might even lose his life. Someone saw through his thoughts and said, "Tisk, you're hesitating. I want to go there and find a job. Unfortunately, my wife and I don't allow it. They say it's a long journey and it would be bad if something happens to me on the way. They insist on stopping me from going. But it's good to stay here. Although this place was poor, at least there was no war. At most, the place was a little remote and life was a little tough." The person looked around and asked the people who heard the news, "Do you know what kind of place Xiangyang County is?" Chapter 533. Your information is really bad. Xiangyang district is a paradise. I heard that the merchants who went there to do business have returned. Many people want to move their families there. I heard that the land there is neat and tidy. It's clean even on rainy days. The houses are like heavenly palaces. The man described it in poor language, and what he said was what he had heard from the merchants. When Fengyi County was still in the hands of the Tsingyi army, the merchants still dared to do business in Xiangyang district. This in itself explained a lot of problems. What do you think Xiangyang district used to look like? It wasn't much better than here. In the hands of District Magistrate Lu Shi, it changed in half a year. Now that Qingan district, Maolin district and Jiaoping district have all been conquered by him, these three poor places might become as good as Xiangyang district. What do you think? If I go for such a good opportunity, I might become rich. The person danced with joy as he spoke. In the end he sighed. Unfortunately, my wife and I won't allow it. Otherwise they'll fight with me. Everyone was discussing it. They were very curious about the Xiangyang district that the person mentioned. Most of them did not believe it. Upon hearing that, the boy servant asked the strategist in a low voice in surprise, "This Lu Shi, isn't he just a district magistrate?" A district magistrate mobilized troops to attack the three nearby districts? Who would believe such nonsense, let alone to recover the lost land in Dongqing and save the people from suffering? A mere district magistrate actually had the ability and military strength to recover the three districts. From what he said, he even had the three districts in his pocket. He's ambitious and bold. The strategist took a sip of tea. He's an interesting person. The teacher had heard of Lu Shi, but Lu Shi, he had never heard of him. Would you like to take a look, sir? The boy servant asked. The teacher glanced at the boy servant amusedly and said, "Didn't you say that you wanted to go to Diang district?" As the master and servant were talking, they heard the person say in exasperation, "What I said is true. Those were spread by merchants when they were doing business. Who dared to go to Qingan district to do business in the past. Now they've all gone there and each of them has made a lot of money. The person in charge is said to be Wei Ci or something. He's a great beauty and does business logically." The attendant widened his eyes in astonishment. "Mr. Zixiao? I don't think so. Maybe he has the same name, or maybe he got the wrong person. With Zixiao's personality, he doesn't seem to be the type to fall into a trap so quickly." The current situation in the world was still chaotic. With Wei Ci's complicated thoughts, he would most likely choose to observe for a while and wait for the true dragon. The page boy pouted and said, "Didn't that person say she was a great beauty?" The strategist couldn't help but laugh. "I've taught you several times, but you didn't listen. Zixiao hates it when people talk about his appearance." The errand boy raised his hand and rubbed his chubby face. His appearance was mediocre. He really did not understand the mentality of those who wish to be ugly. "I'm not allowed to say that she's beautiful. Then I won't say it in the future." The boy grinned. After a while, they listened carefully to that person's narration. The more they listened, the more they felt that the mayor of Qingan district was Wei Ci. The attendant said in a daze, "Maybe, it's really Mr. Zixiao?" The strategist said uncertainly, "Perhaps." The servant asked, "Sir, why don't we go to Qingan district to look for Mr. Zixiao?" The strategist was rather helpless. "You're a man of your word. Since we're already at the border of Diang district, it's only a day's time. It's not a wasted trip to see Huang Song first. If you're not satisfied, we'll go to Qingan district to look for Zixiao." The master and servant drank their tea and returned to the carriage. The weather was still cold and the people were still wearing heavy clothes. After the end of the spring plowing, there was a period of slack. There were not many people on both sides of the street. However, the closer they got to Diang district, the more lively it was. It looked a little like the leisure life of a farmer. This Diang district is peaceful. Seems that Huang something is quite capable. The servant drove the carriage and the wheels of the carriage rolled slowly. The strategist clicked his tongue and did not make any comments. The master and servant found a quiet place and found that there were open tea houses and eateries on both sides of the street. The people who came and went had a slight blush on their faces. It was obvious that they were living a good life. The servant's impression of Huang Song increased gradually. The strategist's ears were filled with his servant's nagging, saying that everything was good, and that Huang Song seemed to be a good person. "You're very noisy," he said calmly. The servant retorted, "If I don't speak, you'll definitely say that the surroundings are too quiet again." Daily pitting master and servant against each other. January 1st. Completed. He was mentally exhausted. Where had the reserved and obedient servant gone? The strategist found a seat in the tea house and asked the waiter some questions. Then he ordered a pot of ordinary tea. Don't you think Daoist district is good, sir? The servant stretched his neck and looked out of the window. Ever since they entered the city, the scenery they saw was quite good. There were even children playing on the streets. It's quite good. However, it was not good enough. Are you going to stay here, sir? Let's meet Huang Song first before making a decision. The strategist frowned, and information about Huang Song flashed across his mind. Since Huang Song and Feng Ju had caused a lot of trouble for Prince Xianxia, Prince Xianxia had investigated the identity and background of these two people. Huang Song was the godson of Huang Tan, who was a eunuch's descendant. His family background was a problem. However, he was not much better. Naturally, he would not be picky about his family background. As for his ability, the Daoist district in front of him was the best evidence. However, he had to focus on this person's breadth of mind and bearing. After all, he was the one who had schemed to get Prince Xianxia to frame Huang Song. How could Huang Song not bear a grudge and be disgusted? He did not want to be put in a difficult position. How do we meet him? The servant asked. Hand over a visitation card and say that Xianxia from Ding County at the border of Qinzhou wishes to meet him. The servant exclaimed and said, Sir, if we directly send a visitation card, he might not be willing to meet us. Xianxia said with a smile, if Huang Song doesn't even know who plotted against him, there's no need to meet him. If Huang Song investigated him, he would naturally know who Xianxia was. Regardless of whether he flew into a rage or something else, he should at least meet him. The servant nodded in agreement and wrote a visitation card neatly. When the gatekeeper saw that the servant was dressed in rags and had countless patches on his clothes, he felt disdain in his heart. He took the visitation card unhappily. Without looking at the contents, the gatekeeper took it directly into the mansion. He did not put the card at the top. Instead, he squeezed it to the bottom. The visitation cards placed at the top were all from important people. After waiting for 3 days, there was still no news. Xianxia asked the servant to describe the situation that day in detail, and the servant said it aggrievedly. How would he pay attention to you when you were wearing a set of patched clothes? I'm afraid this card won't even reach that person's table. Forget it, forget it. If we can't meet, then we can't meet. Pack up, let's set off to find Zixiao. That person still owes your master a few strings of money. He hasn't paid for a few years. This time we must get it back. Xianxia did not have any reluctance to leave, so he asked the servant to pack up and leave. The servant pulled the rug from under his feet. It's not that Mr. Zixiao owes you. It's clearly that you compounded the interest from a penny of buns to a few strings of money. Xianxia turned his head and scolded him softly. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. After the master and servant had been on the road for half a day, Feng Ju, who was already crazy busy, inadvertently flipped through the pile of visitation cards on Huang Song's table. Chapter 534. Seeing this visitation card, Feng Ju's heart surged with ecstasy. Ever since he suffered a loss at the hands of Prince Xianxia, both he and Huang Song had noticed Prince Xianxia's chief strategist, Xianxia. Xianxia was not well known. After all, to become an official or a scholar in Dongqing, there was a requirement for one's family background. People like Xianxia naturally belonged to the lower class. Therefore, Prince Xianxia recruited him, which was why Xianxia went to him and was put in an important position. Unfortunately, Prince Xianxia was not a wise ruler after all. Xianxia was soon given the cold shoulder. Feng Ju did not expect Xianxia's visitation card to appear on Huang Song's table. This meant that Xianxia had already left Prince Xianxia and was currently without a master. If his lord Huang Song could recruit this person, it would be like adding wings to a tiger, and his foundation would be stronger. Although Daoist district had not experienced war, this small county also had its own ecological circle. The forces between them were complicated. Huang Song had indeed put in a lot of effort to completely control these and become the veritable magistrate of Daoist district. As soon as the situation stabilized, Feng Ju sent letters to his former classmates and friends. Now there were already many replies with good news. Unfortunately, they had not come over yet. There were too few people who could be used in Diang district. Now that Xianxia had come and he was a genuine talent, how could Fengju not be happy? No one would complain about having too many talents, let alone Xianxia, who was a top-notch talent in a certain field. Fengju calmed himself down and quickly sent someone to invite Huang Song over. On the other hand, he carefully asked the concierge, "Do you know where the person who sent this visitation card lives?" Fengju glanced at the handwriting on the visitation card. It was well written and did not seem to have been written by a treacherous person like Xianxia. He thought about it and reckoned that this visitation card should have been written by Xianxia's boy servant on his behalf. The concierge glanced at the visitation card and was startled. He looked a little embarrassed and kept dodging Fengju's gaze. Fengju frowned and realized that there might be a twist in this. His heart skipped a beat and he had an ominous premonition. He quickly asked, "Wait, how many days ago was this visitation card sent? Or, did you do something disrespectful to him?" How could the gatekeeper endure Fengju's increasingly imposing manner? He was so scared that he quickly waved his hands, but he couldn't say anything useful. The more Fengju looked, the more he felt that things were getting worse. He slammed his palm on the table, making a thunderous sound that made the gatekeeper's heart tremble. He said, "Tell me the truth, don't hide anything." The gatekeeper was so scared that he was trembling all over. Cold sweat flowed down his back in no time, drenching his clothes. He closed his eyes and accepted his fate. This card was sent here 3 days ago. I didn't disrespect that person. 3 days ago? Fengju widened his eyes and stared at the gatekeeper. His heart was burning with anger, and his right hand was clenched into a fist to prevent himself from losing his composure. "Tell me everything that happened that day in detail, word for word. Otherwise, you know the consequences." Fengju suppressed the raging anger in his heart and said to the gatekeeper, "Do you know what a big mistake you've made? I hope I can make up for my mistakes. Otherwise." In fact, even if the gatekeeper didn't say it in detail, Fengju could guess some of it. He was just flipping through the visitation card out of boredom. This card was placed at the bottom, but according to Huang Song's serious attitude in dealing with official affairs, it was impossible for him to pile up official duties. The only possibility was that the gatekeeper had made the decision to place this visitation card at the bottom. The gatekeeper knelt on the ground. When had he ever seen Fengju speak so harshly? In the past, this noble young master had always been gentle and dignified, with a lazy smile on his face. He treated people very well and didn't put on airs. Now he suddenly showed his imposing manner as a son of an aristocratic family. The gatekeeper was so frightened that he naturally said whatever he wanted to say. As soon as he finished speaking, Huang Song came in from the outside sleepily. Seeing the gatekeeper kneeling on the ground and trembling like a sieve, Fengju was still angry. He said, "Brother Zhu, what big mistake did this little gatekeeper make to make you so angry? Don't be angry, I'll settle the score for you." Even though Fengju was full of anger in the face of Huang Song's mischievous attitude, he suddenly couldn't get angry. He threw the visitation card in his hand into Huang Song's arms, pointed to the gatekeeper and said, "Take a look yourself. This wicked servant has ruined a lot of things." Huang Song was surprised. He had known Fengju for so long and this person had rarely been angry. Once he was really angry, it was definitely not a small matter. Thinking of this, Huang Song quickly opened the visitation card. When he saw the name inscribed, his whole face twitched. The culprit who had once pulled him down from the position of colonel had actually come to send a visitation card? This feeling was really dreamy. However, Huang Song immediately realized that this was a good opportunity to recruit talents. Although he had many useful people under him, most of them were relatively mediocre and top-notch talents were still scarce. Fengju had already written to his classmates and friends, but only a few of them replied affirmatively. Most of the others were taking a wait-and-see attitude. Of those who were willing to come, which one of them didn't come because of Fengju Huang Song's favor of saving people during the earthquake in Dongqing, and the good reputation he had accumulated during the battle in Qinzhou? Otherwise, based on Huang Song's background alone, why would those nobles pay any attention to him? It wasn't that they looked down on Huang Song because of his background, it was just that Huang Song wasn't strong enough for people to ignore his background. Fengju's social skills were very strong. He had made a lot of friends when he was studying in the academy, and they maintained correspondence all year round. Therefore, Feng Zhu could bring a group of capable talents to Huang Song. However, the current Huang Song was still too weak. If he was a little stronger, the number of people he could persuade would at least double. This Xianxia was the first talent who took the initiative to come to him. It was of great significance. Huang Song quickly asked the gatekeeper, "Where's the person who sent the visitation card?" The gatekeeper said with a bitter face, "I only know that they are staying at a guest house in the city, but it's been 3 days. I don't know if they're still there." 3 days had passed? Huang Song looked at the visitation card in surprise, then looked at the gatekeeper and then looked at Feng Zhu, who was still angry. Well, he could understand why Feng Zhu was so angry. Feng Zhu's temper was still good, and he always maintained the reserved demeanor of a son of an aristocratic family. If it were Huang Song, he would have kicked the gatekeeper to vent his anger. In fact, he did do that, but he controlled the strength of his kick and did not kick the gatekeeper too hard. Lead the way. Although 3 days had passed, if they were lucky, the person hadn't left angrily yet. However, when they rushed to the guest house, the news they received was that the person had left the city at daybreak. "It's only been half a day, we can still catch up." Feng Zhu resisted the urge to vomit blood. This gatekeeper was really tireless. Huang Song was also impatient. He took the reins handed to him by a servant, turned around and got on the horse ready to give chase. Feng Zhu looked at the back of Huang Song's horse, and he felt like he was about to collapse. The talent who came to him was actually pushed away just like that. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.